Imagine being kidnapped by a goddess, ripped from your normal life and thrown into a world full of monsters, magic, and heroes, only to discover that you are the only one rejected. Here begins an adventure where no one is safe, and everything can turn into tragedy or luck out of nowhere. Our protagonist is thrown into a deadly forest, deceived by deities and surrounded by hungry creatures. But that's when he decides to survive in the most insane way possible. Betrayals, massacres, forbidden magic, dangerous encounters, and revelations that change everything. You will feel the tension, the adrenaline, and the sensation of walking alongside him in this cruel world. If you think you've seen a dark fantasy story, this one will prove you wrong. The story begins with a goddess kidnapping teenagers. She reveals that they need to save a world where the demon king has resurrected. Everyone panics at the kidnapping and forced labor. However, the goddess tries to calm them by explaining that there is a saint to help them at the start. Meanwhile, some ask about systems, knights, and heroes. Soon, the goddess confirms that everyone will be heroes and will only return after defeating the demon king. Moreover, they will gain special powers. When the explanation ends, the MC asks to leave. Surprisingly, the deity creates a portal and releases him from that world. However, upon crossing, the MC finds himself in a dense and dangerous forest. In addition to fear, he realizes he was deceived by the goddess. Meanwhile, his classmates arrive in Prologina. Immediately, they are greeted by the saint and Prince Alcis, Swordmaster. Next, the princess responsible for magical support appears. Soon, Ohan Wu discovers blessings and curses in the system. Later, the saint explains that each god observes a different hero. Then, she states that she doesn't care about those without blessings. Meanwhile, Kong flees from the werewolves. Despite the despair, he analyzes his blessing and curse. Thus, he concludes that the goddess wants to kill him. When he tries to communicate, he is treated like food. Finally, fairies appear and arrows fly. Additionally, Kong notices a god watching and cries for help. Then, he believes he has been kidnapped by a goddess and fears revealing the truth. Moreover, he suspects that the deity is her friend and avoids detailing. Consequently, the system warns that the god is confused and so is Kong. Soon, he asks if he is an excluded one and the god doesn't understand the term. Thus, he explains that excluded is like a lone wolf impressing the deity. Therefore, the god accepts the meaning and decides to help. Next, a green energy envelopes the arrow and the pain disappears. Finally, Kong thanks and questions the blessing of the excluded. Meanwhile, the blessing resets his conditions and warns about leaving the forest. Then, he escapes silently while the wolves attack. As he flees, he steps on a twig and the monsters chase him. Later, he remembers that he won't feel fatigue and keeps running. However, a stone hits his head and he falls but quickly gets back up. Now, he runs calmly and surprises the monsters. Upon reaching a cliff, he asks for wings but doesn't receive them. Thus, he promises food and they all push him. During the fall, he laughs and hugs the monsters. After the impact, he awakens alive among the bodies. Finally, he notices that one of them survived and sees the name Blue Moon Butcher. Therefore, he comments that the level increases with experience and stronger enemies. Additionally, the saint explains that blessings and levels strengthen the heroes. Thus, it is possible to level up with monsters or divine blessings. While some pay attention, others find it boring. Soon, the saint states that the gods are always watching. When asked about intimate moments, she confirms, startling the group. However, the gods say they have no interest in humans. Suddenly, Zhang Mian receives the blessing of charm. Then, she demonstrates the power and leaves everyone confused about its utility. However, she discovers a punitive curse. Therefore, the saint explains that gods also curse those they dislike. Soon, the curse causes pain and increases damage for impure acts. The princess encourages Zhang to overcome the curse with levels. Meanwhile, Kong finds it strange that his level isn't rising. Consequently, he blames his own curse. When calling the god of the excluded, he realizes he cannot help. Even so, he tries to survive without the world's rules. Preparing a trap, he uses a dagger and vines. As he spins a stone, he applies knowledge and activates his blessing. Thus, he regains control of his body and attacks the monsters. While fighting, he states that he won't die without being killed at once. Despite this, the monsters throw stones and try to tire him out. Then, he counterattacks and defeats them all. Finally, he sighs, and the god admits to having expectations. Therefore, he orders the survivor to stop and asks where the humans are. Additionally, the knoll points in a direction, and the protagonist decides to confirm later. Thus, he asks the monster species, threatens, and gets answers. Soon, he falsely thanks and kills it, remembering he never promised to spare it. Meanwhile, he reflects that he still hasn't leveled up and blames the curse. In the temple, the prince announces training in swordsmanship and magic. Consequently, the students can choose either of the two. Choi claims he will not give up, and the prince believes in him. Then, MANHWA asks if he can leave the temple and receives permission. In his room, he reflects that training is optional for those without talents. Deciding to follow his own path, he plans to explore ruins. The next morning, the prince separates the groups and comments on the princess. Meanwhile, MANHWA sees in his system the blessing of the protagonist. Smiling, he states that his answer was there and heads down to the city. Upon arriving at the guild, he decides to register as a mercenary. However, a redhead confronts him and says that many die. Thus, he believes this is part of his blessing. Inviting her to accompany him, he gains her attention. During this, monsters crawl in the forest. Then, Kong confirms the location of the village with several gnolls. Believing he has talent, he fights, kills, and grows stronger. Finally, the god watches him, and he admits he only evolved thanks to the blessing. Therefore, he asks how much further he must walk, and if the god wants to see him dead. Additionally, a gnoll appears and is quickly defeated with the dagger. Consequently, more monsters emerge, but he cuts them down at once, frustrated for not leveling up. Soon, Kong hears friendly voices and approaches cautiously. Then, he finds 3 adventurers. The archer quickly notices his presence and shoots an arrow as a warning. The group talks and the MC kneels asking for calm. Thus, he decides to accompany them, even without understanding the language. From their posture, he realizes that Gary is the leader, admiring his sword. Meanwhile, the deity complains and comments on the strength of the group. Kong continues observing, pretending to understand to escape the forest. Suddenly, gnolls attack and Gary and Cole advance to protect him. Misa quickly shoots arrows, forcing the monsters to retreat. Then, a huge gnoll appears behind the girl, and our protagonist easily defeats it, leaving the group in shock. But the 3 find the MC's change in behavior strange and feel he has been lying all along. Feeling threatened, Misa aims at him and shoots an arrow hitting his heart. The boy falls, realizing the danger of that world. Therefore, the group comments that he was stronger than he appeared. As they decide to take his belongings, they discuss selling the dagger. Finally, they agree that even if fake, it can still fetch money. Thus, upon realizing that even dead he didn't drop the weapon, Misa warns that the shot didn't hit the heart. Moreover, Cole tries to finish Kong off with the sword. Suddenly, the blonde sees the MC's status window, leaving him in shock. Surprising Cole, Kong explains that one must be alive to show status and attacks him mercilessly. Gary and Misa arm themselves, believing the protagonist is a demon. While Gary hesitates, Kong attacks him too. Even hit by arrows, the MC smiles and yanks the weapon from his chest. Misa steps back, frightened by his incomprehensible words. Then, she pleads for forgiveness, crying before Kang's psychotic expression. Soon he looks at her and she begs for mercy from a monster like him. Consequently, Kong changes clothes with Misa, saying it is the most suitable. With the money and the crossbow, he decides to head to the village. Still not understanding why they tried to kill him, he thinks about Misa's blessing. While the god doesn't care, Kong confirms he will follow the initial plan. In the temple, the princess begins the lesson explaining the origin of magic. Additionally, Students comment that calculations can make them archmages. While the nerd claims to keep purity for magic, another mocks him. However, a girl says that magic is chemistry and promises to demonstrate. Yet, others remind her that without talent it is impossible, making her uncomfortable. The princess intervenes, drawing everyone's attention. She declares that talent is indispensable. Moreover, as this aptitude is the foundation of magic, knowing the history of the founder becomes equally essential. At this moment, the group appears confused, trying to understand the meaning of her words. The princess reinforces that, among all qualities, talent is the most decisive. Shortly after, she creates a flame in the palm of her hand and clarifies that it depends on lineage and magical education, asking them to memorize this principle. Then, she states she is the legitimate daughter of her family and, at the same time, a product of her learning. She reveals her name, Athena Archmazing, descendant of the founder's third husband. She carries both the heritage and the connections and assures that this group will have great potential as heroes and disciples. At this point, Eubora raises her hand, asking a question. The doubt is whether someone, without noble origin and without education, can still become a mage. The students murmur that it is a good question, but insist it makes no difference. The princess remains silent for a moment and smiles, excited, confirming that it is possible. Then, she holds Eubora's hand, promising to explain later. Next, she announces that Eubora is a heroine and she agrees. As she closes her eyes, Athena declares that the young girl will be under her tutelage. A magical breeze surrounds Eubora. Then, a luminous circle appears behind the two, and the princess officially proclaims that Eubora is her first apprentice. The students are left speechless. Some fall back, demanding a magical oath. With her eyes half closed, Athena makes the vow. An intense light courses through her body. Eubora remains with her eyes closed. Upon opening them, she receives the princess' congratulations. Athena states that she is now a full-fledged mage. Eubora is surprised, trying to understand what just happened. The system confirms that she has acquired the rank C magic blessing. The princess, euphoric, explains that early apprentices develop even more talent. Eubora realizes that, after the learning pact, the blessing appeared, and Athena confirms that it is her gift. It seems that without relatives or a master bearing the blessing, it is impossible to become a mage. The pink-haired girl comments that this is why talent is so decisive, and the heroine understands. She closes her eyes and returns to the first question. A flame of fire appears in her right hand. Athena explains that the founder, now a goddess of magic, left a blessing for descendants and disciples. As she enlarges the fireball, she says that any common mage would conjure that easily, but with the blessing it is called white magic. The students are even more impressed, although Athena has more to demonstrate. Raising her slightly trembling left hand, she creates a small floating purple flame. Strangely, her fingers tremble as the fire grows, until the gloves disintegrate and her skin cracks. The students recoil, frightened, asking what that means. The princess, also shaken, questions if talent has always been indispensable. Eubora covers her mouth, surprised. Athena explains that in her right hand is the white magic with blessing, and in her left the black magic without blessing. Someone screams, heightening the general fear. A maid reaches her, pinching her cheeks and reminding her of the rule never to use black magic. A priest rushes over, and Athena tries to justify, saying she did that just to facilitate the hero's understanding. The maid threatens to tell the queen, and the princess begs for forgiveness. She pleads that they do not reveal it to her mother while the priest heals her left hand. Eubora apologizes for causing that, but Athena assures her there is no blame, and she says she is happy that they now understand the risks of black magic. The princess regains her composure, and the students soon ask about this type of power, wanting to know if it is evil, but Athena clarifies that it is not a malice, but rather the force of nature itself. Meanwhile, Kong Hansu arrives in the city. The guard says something to him and extends his hand. Thus, even understanding only part of the language, He hands over 4 silver coins, receiving thanks in return as he walks through the city. He observes several armed people, probably due to the forest and carnivorous plants. He finds the indicated location at the entrance and is grateful for the visual sign. During the night, he comments that the money is excellent, and concludes that it is possible to make friends with anyone, even without speaking. The guard appears uncomfortable, and Kong smiles slightly. He also feels uneasy and asks about the deity's gender, making her even more embarrassed. Soon after, he rubs his arm, trying to clean a bloodstain that won't come off. The guard shows concern and Kong questions him, but the system reveals that the deity holds a secret. Suddenly, he hears someone speaking from the other side of the door and is startled. The voice thanks someone, stating that as mayor, he will take responsibility. Kong and the guard remain still. He shouts that he is taking a shower and asks them to wait. The person, aware that he did not speak the language, ignores him and says they understood. Kong quickly gets dressed. He grabs his dagger and warns that someone capable of communicating with him is behind the door. He positions himself as he walks over. With that, he realizes there is only one explanation. The person behind the door is not human, but a hostile race. The voice assumed he did not master the language. Kong concludes that the creature on the other side hates heroes and considers that it could be a gnoll or a demon. Breathless, he stares at the door and unlocks it. The guard watches attentively as the protagonist sits on the bed and gives permission for entry. He hides the dagger behind him. The person asks for permission as they open the door. Kong remains still, analyzing. He imagines what kind of monster he will see and asserts that it does not matter the race. All can be dangerous, what matters is being able to converse. He asks what happened and the visitor says not to worry, as he is the village leader, and came to check on the traveler unable to speak the local language. Kong understands and wonders if he is a human or a disguised monster, noticing that he seems young. The man observes his status window and comments on the peculiar name, leaving Kong uncomfortable. Advises to hide his window, surprising him to learn that this is possible. The old man expected to find a bold fairy, but sees only an insignificant boy, and Kong notices his disappointment. The village has a bad history with fairies. The gnolls, expelled by them, migrated to human territory. Many who lost their families took refuge there, seeking revenge. The god looks at Kong with frustration, saying that people no longer remember the grudge, and that most of the town are newcomers. Before leaving, the man asks a question. He shows a potion and claims to have dined with a paralysis potion, and wants to know why it didn't work. Kong raises the dagger immediately. He advances against the visitor. The man smiles, seeing the blade so close to his neck, and says it's impressive. Kong is startled to see his arm trembling. The man explains that fairies have high resistance to potions, a type of magic he developed. That's why it wouldn't help to resist just with immunity. He pulls the dagger from Kang's hands, who asks how. The visitor says it wasn't his fault, just pure bad luck. The god states that he tried to warn him, and Kong remains silent. Elsewhere, the leader comments that people hate the gnolls for killing and stealing their families. He reveals that, in fact, they were also victims. Kong, tied up, stares at him as he states that the guilty ones are those who dominated the gnolls' territory. In front of the 2 captured people, he declares that the fairies are the true enemies, and asks Kong to check his own status window. There is the name Crimson, level 16, a lunatic's blessing and a fairy's curse. Kong wonders about this curse, realizing it targets the enemies of fairies, intensifying their hatred and damage. He asks if any god did that, but Crimson clarifies that it comes from the grudge of the fairies he killed. Kong forces a smile, reflecting that every curse carries a meaning. He comments that he shouldn't reveal this to a stranger, but Crimson points a dagger at his face, and states that he also doesn't intend to talk much. However, upon seeing the weapon, he inquires where it was obtained. Kong thinks he got it from a gnoll called Butcher of the Blue Moon, but, seeing the prisoners, decides not to tell the truth. He looks at the dagger and thinks that survival is a priority. With the blade at his throat, he says he obtained it by killing a fairy that attacked him, claiming they have the same enemy. The old man is impressed that he killed a royal fairy and asks if he knew that. Crimson laughs, questioning if he really didn't know. He states that the more he listens to Kong, the less he wants to kill him. And the boy begs to be spared. The visitor laments that he saw his status window and reveals he is a mage without a blessing. Kong doesn't understand, and Crimson comments that he truly is unaware of that world. The old man declares himself an outcast, saying there are no people or gods merciful enough to teach him. Crimson asks what that means, and Kong replies that he is a lone wolf in the vast forest. The old man laughs, finding the expression curious, even though he can no longer run through it, leaving Kong confused. The deity prays that Kong has a better next life, and he wonders what is wrong with that place. Crimson lights several candles with a green flame. One of the chains comes loose and a woman falls. The old man steps on her with the candle in hand. He declares himself a dark mage who needs to sacrifice lives to prolong his own. Smiling cruelly, he says the curse corrodes him, but he can resist by sacrificing even more. Looking at Kong, he states that for having killed a royal fairy, he will be sacrificed without pain. Kong comments that he is very kind for that, and begins to devise an escape plan. He calls the leader Crimson stares at the boy, asking if he wants to plead for his life. Kong shouts that obviously not, and the mage decides to listen to the last words of someone about to die. But he hears a noise and complains that the insects are annoying. With a whip, he begins to strike the fallen fairy. Kong watches. When Crimson finishes, he says it is now quiet. Turning to the protagonist, he asks what he wanted to say. Kong thinks that something about him is not normal, and perhaps he wants to show his own sense of justice. Then, he states that his journey must have been difficult, especially since no one recognizes his effort. The old man smiles, asking if he really understands him. Kong says yes, because he is also an outcast. Crimson concludes that this means being a lone wolf in the vast forest, and believes he is also an outcast. The god protests and Kong agrees, but at least he managed to gain empathy. Crimson is happy and says he liked Kong, but states that, as an outcast, he must remain alone. And Kong realizes that he wants to kill him to maintain that title. Oh God, he laughs nonstop, and Kong complains that it's not the time. Crimson expresses contentment at finding someone who understands him and insists that Kong watch something important. The protagonist agrees, although he feels that everything has gotten worse. Meanwhile, Crimson observes the fairies around, searching for something specific. He suggests to one of the prisoners to accompany him, as he hasn't been feeling well lately. The blonde murmurs something, irritated. The old man refuses, saying that a good comrade needs to survive to entertain. With bloodied hands, he holds a chain. He frees the fairy in the center of the magic circle. Smiling, he announces that he will begin. He calls upon the Mother of Life to allow him to receive the remainder of that fairy's life. Kong questions the glow of the circle before him. The old man stares at the prisoner. He orders her to give her life to him. The fairy, frightened, frozen, kneeling. Crimson promises to send his friend to be by her side soon. With a cruel smile, he grabs her hair and warns her about the price of refusal. The fairy cries and seems to accept. Crimson declares the pact sealed. Kong wonders what is happening with the leader and himself. He imagines that Crimson is rejuvenating with the fairy's life, and raises his face, questioning if he has failed stepping on the fairy's body. The old man asserts that his magic has succeeded, but Kong observes and comments that he doesn't look any younger, and Crimson laughs, revealing that he is not human. Approaching, he says that he not only prolonged life. He asks if Kong knows how many lives of fairies and travelers he has taken, claiming that the curse has become repulsive. Kong acknowledges his determination, but rejects his methods. Crimson explains that upon receiving the curse, he became sick and aged. A traveling wizard suggested an experiment. He opens his shirt. Kong watches, perplexed. He realizes that on the old man's chest there is a knoll. Crimson confirms, revealing that he is a knoll. Kong asks if it is a hybrid race. The old man bellows that it is the fusion between human and knoll, a race that hates fairies. Kong questions if he will do everything alone, and the wizard assures him that his dark magic is enough to hunt them. The protagonist says he is not a fairy, and Crimson responds to ignore the details. He squeezes Kang's shoulder, thanks him for helping him find his true identity as an outcast, promises not to forget him and, as a gift, will use his life well, and Kong starts to sweat, imagining he will be killed. Crimson confirms because he is an outcast. Kong becomes serious, recognizing the risk of facing a true outcast and accepting his fate. Princess Athena Archmazing. She is a prodigy of the magical kingdom, admired by all. Though it is a secret, her life is almost completely occupied with duties and talent, without needing to strive for results. Eubora comments that magic is born from imagination and asks how to make it more efficient. Striving to impress the princess, Eubora is chosen as the first apprentice. The pink-haired girl praises the question and suggests following the tips from the teacher or magical relatives. Athena creates a white light in her hand. The students are impressed and ask if it is a new magic. Soon after, the princess shapes an ice rabbit. Eubora is amazed by the ice magic. The Archmazing family inherited ancestral talents and usually manifests unusual fire each generation. Although Athena explains that her unique magic is ice and offers to try, Eubora cannot. Embarrassed, the princess admits she lacks teaching skills and says that with experience, everyone will succeed. Eubora thanks her, and Athena downplays the importance. Someone calls the princess, diverting her attention. Jiang Mian asks what happens to those who do not receive blessings. The others identify themselves and ask for equal treatment. Athena smiles, holds the rabbit and brings it to her mouth, startling the group. Then she asks who will be the second apprentice, and everyone shouts to be chosen. The heroes call out Athena's name, but she silences them with a word, asking them to notify her when they decide. Yu asks if she did that on purpose, but Athena, impassive, asks what he meant. He lets it go, and the princess ends the class. The heroine comments on the unique magic of the ice rabbit, acquired through much training, and Yu asks if it is like dark magic. Athena, startled, asserts that dark magic is different because it requires sacrifices. Meanwhile, Kong is in the magic circle. The old man demands that he give his life. Kong reflects on the weight of sacrifices. Crimson insists, but Kong asks to see Misa one last time. Surprised, Crimson wants to know why, and Kong states that he is her boyfriend. The old man laughs, saying that Cole is the boyfriend. Irritated, Kong asserts that Cole is the ex. Crimson asks for proof, and Kong suggests he smell her. Convinced, Crimson apologizes and says that Gary and Cole would be suspects if Misa went missing. Kong agrees with the reasoning. Crimson asks if Kong has another request, and he asks to be released upon reuniting with Misa. The old man agrees, and Kong declares the pact. Crimson joins his hands, and Kong feels an absurd pain, remembering that he promised it wouldn't hurt. Kong bows, and Crimson bids farewell, saying that Misa has gone far away. Then the old man hesitates, and Kong takes advantage, landing a hit to his chin. Crimson stumbles furious, and accuses Kong of deceiving him. The protagonist claims he was deceived first. He almost went insane from the pain. Kong comments that that feeling would turn friends into enemies. The old man asks how he survived. Kong prepares and says that in hell he will know, as his magical restriction has ended. The blessing of the excluded even restores life expectancy. With his hand against the wall, Crimson considers himself a beginner who barely survived. Kong points at him, reminding him of the promise to let him go if he survived. He grabs the dagger and says it's time to fulfill the agreement. He thinks while touching his chin, and looking at one of the fairies, he declares her the winner. He raises the dagger, and cuts the chains. She is startled. Kong holds her by the arm, saying he now has a witness. As she is weak, he places her on his shoulders. She screams something, but he ignores it, and runs to the exit. Crimson turns, shouting to where he thinks Kong is going, saying that it is forbidden. Kong remembers the pact and thinks he is safe until he finds Misa, but knows he cannot find someone who has died. The old man, serious, recalls the promise, and says it can be annulled if he regains what he lost. Casting something black, the shadow settles on Kong. He realizes it wasn't a bluff. The old man shows frustration, saying he should have accepted a peaceful death. Kong asks if he is serious, and asserts that it is still too early to give up suddenly. Crimson feels his body give way. He starts to spit blood. Confused, his eyes widen. Life is drained from him as he screams. He falls to his knees, feeling his strength vanish. Kong asks what that is. Both look up and see a red glow, and Kong says it is the old man's strength fading. Crimson, even more wrinkled, says he doesn't believe it, and claims that no one would leave alive after stealing so many lives. Then he asks if Kong is some immortal vampire. Calmly, Kong reflects on his identity. The god tells him to stop thinking so highly of himself, and Kong thinks that this god is being annoying. But then he decides, and declares himself the apostle of the excluded. The deity writhes in shame, and Kong smiles satisfied. The old man spits blood. Kong says that defeating someone of level 16 would give a lot of experience, but decides he needs to escape until he hears someone swearing revenge. Surprised, he looks at the old man. The knoll in his chest threatens to kill him for destroying his dream. A red aura runs down his arm. He lunges forward, shouting that he will kill him, and Kong throws the fairy. He receives a blow to the chest. Kneeling, the knoll praises his resilience, and explains that this is the knoll fighting style. He saved this power to hunt fairies, and Kong laments. The knoll is surprised that the protagonist survived. He asks how he is still alive, and Kong admits it was risky. The old man grits his teeth. Powerless, he tries to flee, but a hand grips his leg. He looks down. The fairy holds him, and he insults her while she says something. He screams for them to let go, but Kong is already behind him. And when he realizes, the blade is already cutting his head. The fairy is startled, but Kong knows he cannot stop because there is one more left. The knoll, weakened, calls for his daughter, lamenting that he cannot take revenge, and saying that he loves her. Kong wishes him to rest in peace and finishes. The god laments, and Kong agrees. Turning, he raises the dagger over his shoulder. The fairies are freed. He releases them and calls the villagers and the militia to check everything. He prepares to leave, thinking it is all over, but they start to scream. He turns around smiling. Everyone watches him with grim faces. Not understanding, he replies that it was just minutes ago. Now, he is running. He stops at the edge of a cliff and asks what those fairies are saying. When the sun rises, he looks into the abyss. He promises that one day he will reach them. He takes a deep breath and leaps, fleeing from them and claiming to hate that fantasy world. A long time ago, a conflict arose due to learning relationships. However, everything was resolved when several wizards wanted to become masters. Among them, some aspired to the title of Hero's Master. The princess explains that it is necessary to visualize magic with focus. With that, the boys manage to conjure fire. Someone asks about math and magic, but Athena doesn't understand and says it is a merchant's topic. The boy insists, and the princess interrupts, saying that magic does not depend on that. Embarrassed, he is left without an answer. A girl comments that they can use fire magic because her master can too, so math is unnecessary. Embarrassed, the boy thought he could become an archmage just with modern knowledge. An old man corrects the girl, stating that math is applied in magic. Excited, the boy regains his confidence. He gives an explanation using the fireball. The princess only studied theory, but they started using math to increase efficiency. In battle, it's vital to conserve mental energy. To cast, the angle, direction, and wind must be evaluated. The mage casts the fireball, causing an explosion in the air. The bearded man asks if that's what the hero meant, and he confirms. The old man asks excitedly if he can help with the lessons. With discouragement, Athena agrees. The students approach the mages, asking questions. With the master's help, the heroes learn magic quickly. Some gods observe the group. Meanwhile, a storm falls over a quiet city. Lightning strikes the surroundings. A woman tends to the wounds of a young fairy. She says she's done and asks if she feels better. The princess fairy's maid, Espresso, responds arrogantly, and the human girl apologizes. All they managed was to reduce the pain with medicine. Only a saint could heal her, but neither of the two in the world would do that. They would never help a common fairy as she leaves. The girl says she will capture the human and asks the fairy to rest. Furious, the girl knows the culprit is the village leader, but the townsfolk allowed it, so they are complicit. When she returns to the kingdom, she will report everything. An unexpected knock interrupts her. Outside, a voice says it's someone familiar, and the fairy opens the door. The pink-haired girl enters and informs that the mercenaries lost sight of Kong. The blonde asks why they should care about humans. She reminds that it was the protagonist who saved them from the evil leader. The girl says humans are treacherous and that one carried the prince's dagger. But the other replies that he still saved them. The girl falls silent, as they received no order to kill him, but says humans are beasts that kill each other. The other scolds her for calling them that. Another fairy appears and questions what that remark meant. They call her advisor Celebless. The redhead asks if everything is all right, and the blue-haired one demands an answer. Celebless is a royal fairy named Holy Sun, and despite being eternal, ended up serving as a toy for Crimson, and remained trapped longer in the basement. Espresso says everything will be resolved when they tell the kingdom, but the fairy screams that it's not over yet, because even fleeing alone, Kong freed her. Convinced, she believes Crimson was only seeking her eternal life, but the advisor says the savior used dark magic. Hansu broke the pact, and when that happens, everything acquired must be paid back. That's why the leader self-destructed by underestimating Kong. Smiling, Celebless recalls Espresso running carefree through the palace crying. The blonde vents that the young one doesn't understand the depth of her despair and the humiliation she feels. The other agrees but insists she needs to find the protagonist still. The fairy warns her of the risk of going out in that situation. Irritated, the young girl asks not to be called advisor the next time they meet. According to her, that title doesn't suit a lady who loses her patience easily. From the wall, the little god watches everything little by little. He moves away from there in the forest. The deity observes the boy from above, wondering if he is still alive. Tired, the protagonist calls out to the god, questioning if he needs glasses. Meanwhile, the prince leads the aspiring swordsman as they enter the hall. They show surprise and excitement, asking if this is a tea break and not a fencing class. The banquet hall shines in the eyes of the young ones. Soon, everyone settles at the table. Smiling, the blonde raises his cup and proposes a toast to the heroes who chose the path of the sword. On one side, the veterans shout, and their enthusiasm frightens the newcomers. With his cup in hand, the young man explains that the idea they had of training is quite naive, and that here they will be shown true fencing. Ordering the knight commander to make a demonstration, a request the man accepts as an honor, then climbing up to the arena. First, the boy shows the version of fencing they imagine, telling the knight to fight without using his own technique. Smiling, the prince charges, executing sword movements worthy of a video game. A girl comments, impressed, that it's amazing, and another hero emphasizes that, despite everything, it's still fencing. Then the knight, serious, disarms the prince with a single sword throw. The blade falls beside the young man, who praises the commander's dance of swords, leaving him flattered. Next, the prince picks up his weapon and announces that he will now show the fencing style that heroes will truly learn. Soon after, the blonde asks the commander to use all his strength. The prince's wish is law for the man, who begins to emanate aura through his sword. With the same aura, the little blonde prepares to receive him. Then the commander advances, and the blades collide with force. In the clash, the knight's sword breaks. Kneeling, he admits defeat. Satisfied, the young man praises the evolution of the man's technique, who thanks him deeply. At the table, the heroes exchange glances and ask what that was. Directly, the prince explains that true fencing is the power to penetrate all of the enemy's defenses with a single strike. One of the boys, impressed, finally understands the importance of efficiency. With the concept clear, the blonde announces the start of fencing lessons, but first asks them to finish their tea. As they drink, they notice something strange in the flavor. Everyone complains that it is horrible. To learn fencing, they need to take that medicine and receive the warrior's blessing, so the prince warns that they will have to get used to the taste. Warrior is the title for those who have met the requirements to become stronger and must now defeat enemies with justice and love. Choi Kongmin, brave, downs the contents in one go and even asks for another dose. The blonde suggests he eat something and asks the commander to bring more tea. Thus, the knight serves him another steaming cup. The gods, curious, watch the scene and let out some laments in another part of the world. Kong Hansu comments that the place is dangerous, but at least there are no monsters in the forest below the cliff, recalling the pursuit by the village mercenaries. If the guard hadn't opened the gate, the protagonist would have already been captured. High up in a tree, the boy observes some gnolls. Upon noticing his presence, the leader talks about the meat up there. The gnolls greet him in a polite manner, and it is ironic to realize that he trusts monsters more than fairies and humans. Smiling, he considers the situation perfect. Then he jumps from the tree. As he falls, he already thinks about what question he will ask the creatures. One gnoll is caught off guard by a knee to the head. Another receives an elbow to the mouth. The leader has his throat ripped out by the protagonist. Soon after, the boy lands lightly on the ground. Although the three were easy to defeat, the small deity analyzes the boy, who feels his body lighter and wonders if he leveled up. Checking the status window, he notices that only his dividend increased to 343 while his level remains at 1. Intrigued, he asks what this dividend means, and the god laughs, saying that the higher, the better, but the protagonist cannot thank him. For the first time, he gains something truly useful from the god, and then approaches the gnoll that took the knee. Hansu comments, still confused because of the fairies, and the gnoll, excited, asks about fairy meat. The boy confirms that he has tried it. He recalls the solution created by the former leader, and begins to inquire about gnoll fencing. Despite still being weak and knowing that even reaching level 2 won't make him powerful immediately, he decides to learn some techniques. The monster, drooling, speaks of the power that comes from meat, and the young man asks how the eyes turn red. The gnoll replies that it is thanks to the power of the meat, requiring a huge amount of food, and the protagonist says he wants to see this transformation. In the end, Hansu realizes he didn't gather much useful information beyond power of meat, concluding that he will have to study the gnoll ecosystem if he wants to take his revenge. Meanwhile, Prince also comments that magic requires talent, but fencing can be mastered with time and money. He shares various insights on the subject, but the young ones show little interest. With a tired expression, the blue-haired boy asks for more tea, and the blonde explains that the effectiveness decreases if they drink too much. Choi Gangmin, irritated, thinks about how he needs to strengthen himself and stand out. The prince suggests cleaning the mouth with honey, emphasizing that consistency is essential, and that 2 cups a day are sufficient. Confident, Choi decides to maintain this routine, but the blonde warns that the warrior's blessing will not appear immediately. Intrigued, the boy asks how long it will take, hearing that it could take up to a year. Before he can complain about the time frame, a light appears before him, and he receives a new blessing of courage. Euphoric, he realizes that it strengthens him the more he fights, but the effect resets if he is defeated or gives up with his hand on his face. He finds it incredible, making the battle god proud and annoying a martial god. The blonde congratulates him, placing enormous expectations on the fact that he received a blessing so early. Right after, the prince teaches how to hide the status window. In another area, a gnoll screams for meat, while Kong watches him devouring a wild boar. In silence, he reflects on having followed the monster for 2 days just to learn about this so-called power of meat. During the meal, the gnoll notices something strange and attacks the boy, who remembers how he is always assaulted as soon as he lets his guard down. Until that moment, the monster had not managed to hit him after a kick. The boy tells him not to get up again, and the defeated gnoll thinks that the human is still weak. Kong asks if he is really level 6, and the excited wolf confirms, showing fairy hair tied to his arm. Curious, the young man recalls that gnolls usually rip the heads off fairies and asks how he managed to hunt too. The monster replies that he is strong, while the protagonist is the strange one. The boy wants to know if the monster can see his level, and the wolf says no, but is sure he is level 1, calling him easy prey. Irritated, Kong punches the gnoll in the head, concluding that he must feel this by instinct. After a while, the monster screams, indicating a path, revealing that there are many fairies in that direction. Smiling, the boy gets excited, as it is precisely the side of the fairy village that ambushed him. The gnoll comments that fairy meat is not good, leaving the protagonist confused. In a single bite, the gnoll swallows a whole rabbit, saying that this meat, yes, is excellent. Kong realizes that his strength increases the more he eats, and considers this much simpler than resorting to dark magic like the old leader did, then asks if the gnoll is satisfied. However, the monster screams that he is full and his muscles grow along with his body. His fur turns reddish and he concludes that he needs more meat. Salivating, he calls the protagonist talking meat. Then, he lunges forward claiming that the boy will be his meal. But the young man gathers a red aura in his hand, thanking the gnoll. He reveals that he discovered the power of meat because of him. In a swift motion, the protagonist attacks the creature's abdomen. Cutting the gnoll's body in half, Kong observes his own hands. On the ground, the monster asks how that meat can be so strong. Smiling, the boy thanks him for the time they spent together and says he is powerful thanks to him. The gnoll questions if the boy is also a gnoll, contradicting. He states he is just human. Looking at himself, he finds all of this incredible, while feeling an intense empty emotion, but close to the desire to always be sated like a gnoll. The aura spreads throughout his body. Impressed, the god concludes that this is the true power of meat, but the young man believes that no one else will be able to use this ability without the blessing of the excluded. He would probably have died when his life force was drained. Thanks to that blessing, before the energy runs out, it regenerates, forming an infinite cycle. Excited, he says that this power is truly fantastic. But the god scolds him, telling him to stop acting like a child. Sometime later, Kong darts through the forest at night. The other monsters smell fresh meat. Manically, he pushes them out of the way. After knocking down 2, he continues running, and leaves the deity stunned even stronger. He is not happy to be running when he could be under the covers messing with his phone. Still, he crosses the forest filled with creatures that devour people. The young god points to the left, and the boy thanks him for the warning. Upon reaching a wall, he smiles and pulls out the dagger, planning to take revenge using a bit of this new power. 2 guards are talking nearby. Hidden in the bushes, Kong intended to sneak in from behind, but soon realizes that the security is stricter than he expected. In his mind, he feels relieved to have memorized the village map. The little god tells him to go ahead, which confuses him. He says it is very sudden, but the young man insists on the idea. He is suspicious of the deity's attitude, but his instincts agree. Upon reaching the wall, he prepares to jump. He drives the dagger into the wood. With a push, he climbs and passes to the other side, landing softly on the ground. Relieved, he thinks it is good that there are no guards at that point. Excited, the god tells him to be grateful, and the boy promises eternal gratitude. However, the moment has come to start his mission. One of the guards leaves the bathroom. He is startled to feel a presence behind him, but the young man drives the dagger into his throat. The man still tries to say something. However, he soon dies and collapses, making the boy realize that there is no difference between killing humans and monsters. Dragging the body, he imagines that there are people who will miss that guard. Still, he thinks that he also has a family he couldn't say goodbye to. With a heavy expression, he declares that he will not be trampled by any of them. The deity watches him with a provocative gaze. After a while, the young man sighs, exhausted. After killing so many, he questions why no one has noticed yet. He becomes curious and wonders where the fairies are. The god looks at him with disdain as Kong tries to understand why he can't find any of them. Ironically, assuming that they are all in the bathroom, the small deity mocks the protagonist's late realization. Suddenly, he hears human voices. He sees some people walking through the streets and talking, while carrying figures with bags covering their heads. The boy observes the scene, finding it curious. In the room of the fairy espresso, behind her, a hand approaches, covering her mouth. It prevents her from screaming, ordering her to stay quiet. The man places a bag over her head. Another asks about the injury, and the first explains that the young woman bit him when he tried to gag her. The older one asserts that the fairy must accompany them. They command her to keep walking, and she thinks that the other fairies are also being taken. By the echo of the place, the girl realizes she has been taken to the old leader's basement. One of the women present admits that they knew what Crimson was doing, but they only wanted to protect their way of life. Under the bag, Espresso recognizes the voice of the healer from before. All the fairies are gathered there, and the woman declares that this is their punishment, the retribution for having left the leader to fight alone. One of the villagers claims to have heard that the fairies despise humans, that they would take their homes and kill their families if they survived. For this reason, a knight orders everyone to stay home, as something is about to happen, and even the mercenaries should not remain outside. The young woman stays silent and suggests they start at once. With a psychotic look, they decide to act in Crimson's name. They attack directly at the chest of one of the fairies, causing her death. The knight is the one who signs the final sentence. Then they say goodbye to Espresso. They all advance and exterminate the remaining fairies. They claim that only one is left. Then they begin to discuss the fate of the last one. The fairy herself warns that their goal will not be achieved while she is alive. They hesitate, as she is at the top of the hierarchy and they fear reprisals. The young woman understands the conflict they feel, but she remembers that they tried to kill their own savior, only to keep a secret, which fills her with rage. One of the boys suggests sparing her if she swears silence, but she states that this kind of oath is impossible. The blue-haired girl asks why she refused, since she could lie. Smiling, the woman replies that a fairy does not lie, not even to survive. With no alternative, they decide to do it in the least painful way possible. The knight prepares himself. With her eyes closed, she does not see the blood flying until she feels splatters on her face, and instinctively opens her eyes. Before her, the head of the executioner is in the air. Confused, she tries to understand what happened. Kong is right in front of her. She recognizes him. Surprised, the fairy says something that the protagonist does not understand. The boy is impressed to have found her again, but before any dialogue, he needs to deal with the survivors. Thus, he charges at the men, as he had planned from the beginning. One of the young women panics and kneels. Crying, she cries out for help. Surprised, the boy realizes he understands the language and is happy to finally grasp something. But, unfortunately for her, he eliminates her right after. Soon after, he notices another girl trying to escape and calling for help. He simply throws the dagger, hitting the fugitive's head. He watches the body fall, lifeless. Everything happens even more easily than he expected, and he concludes that his best strategy was to take down the most dangerous one first. Then, Celeblesse tries to talk to the protagonist. He wonders what she is saying, until he notices his own status window. She approaches, implying that she is showing it on purpose. Kong notices that she has 3 high-level blessings. Seeing the tamer blessing, he considers it useless without animals nearby. Still, he imagines there must be some reason for her to display that window. He asks if her name is Celeblesse, and the young woman confirms. Seeing her smile, he feels nothing special, probably because of his own blessing. Even so, it is clear that there is something more there. The god appears uncomfortable and encourages the boy to continue living as an outcast. Bending down, Kong sighs, saying he will be punished if he stops being an outcast. The young fairy does not understand, and the boy concludes that she is lucky. The initial plan was to exterminate all. However, he decided to spare her precisely because she had an experience similar to his. To survive, he made sure to spread his name to the people of that world, but he realized that it served no purpose. He orders her to turn her back and thinks it wouldn't be different from the villagers if he eliminated all the fairies from that place. The young woman tries to rise with difficulty, but without strength, she collapses. Quickly, he supports her, complaining that she shouldn't irritate him. He holds her while she reacts strangely happy. He is surprised to notice that she knows how to say his name, and she seems to confirm it. Sometime later, they walk side by side, and he wonders why everything is so quiet. Even after so many deaths, then, he decides to ask the god, but the small deity refuses to talk. The young man understands that he will need to part ways with the young woman to calm the god's anger, He cannot trust anyone in the village, and the forest is filled with gnolls before anything else. They need to get out of there. So they run among the trees, and the young man carries her in his arms. At one point, the young woman calls him and says something that catches his attention. She points up and speaks a few more words. He raises his gaze. Confused. Frightened, he sees a huge phoenix cutting through the sky above them. The creature lets out a cry in their direction, and lands right in front of the two. The young man thinks he will be fine thanks to its blessing, but estimates that the fairy in his arms would be reduced to ashes. The young woman tugs at his shirt, saying something he interprets as a request to be put down. He asks if she wants to stay behind so he can escape. However, she takes a few steps toward the flaming bird, seeming capable of conversing with the creature normally. Kong wonders if, by any chance, she has become friends with the phoenix. Then, Celebles calls his name, saying something more with his name at the end. She approaches. The young man was going to ask what she was saying when he receives a sudden kiss. While the small deity is in shock at the scene, the boy, blushing, questions the reason for that gesture. The girl, however, just smiles at him, while the phoenix watches the two in silence. Confused, he sees the fairy mounting the creature, which rises and takes flight, leaving him standing, watching the departure. Soon after, the god accuses the excluded one of a crime, and, irritated, the young man pulls his own hair. Equally furious, he laments having lost his first time as a reward for saving someone, calling it harassment. However, when checking the status window, he discovers a new fairy blessing. Feeling satisfied that it is of high rank, the deity stares at him, bewildered, but the young man just comments on the ironies of life. The blessing extends his lifespan and prolongs youth, as well as making fairies more receptive. He can consume this blessing to increase his power, even though it burns part of his longevity. The god grumbles at the boy's happiness, but Kong is glad to be away from the fairy with the atmosphere lighter between the two. The small deity hears him suggest that they venture deeper into the forest. Sometime later, new monsters appear, and the young man approaches, asking if everything will be all right. Kong proposes a tour of the house. In another scenario, the prince comments that they arrived there 3 days ago, and that now they will hunt to level up. The blonde reassures the group, saying that the Order of Knights will attract the monsters. The princess emphasizes the importance of blessings, whose value increases with rank and level. The young people get excited about the chance to evolve, while the girls comment on the physical changes. Suddenly, someone spots a slime, but before they can attack it, the prince and princess explain that they are useful. The princess says that these creatures prevent infections, and the young people, embarrassed, promise not to attack them. Then, the prince, clapping his hands, comments that they should deal with level 2 goblins, but that on that day they will hunt level 4 gnolls. The students become apprehensive, but the princess reassures them, reminding them that they can be revived by the saint. The prince guarantees that the group is even capable of facing level 6 orcs. When the monsters approach, the young people, still tense, advance to combat. A white gnoll attacks first and injures one of the heroes, who collapses. Then others are hit and a girl tries to cast a spell but fails. Afraid, she cries as the creature gets closer and closer. Everyone cries for help, and the prince, exhausted, cuts the gnoll in half with a single blow. The novices, physically and mentally destroyed, cry on the ground. The saint appears, praising the prince for guiding the heroes. Kneeling, she offers a prayer and heals one of the young men with her luminous aura. As soon as the door closes, the young man stands up renewed, claiming that he has been revived. The girl, serious, encourages the group to give their all, promising to bring them back as many times as necessary. Everyone remains tired, reflecting on the persistence of that gnoll. Choi thanks for the time gained, and the young man approaches from behind, striking the monster with a precise thrust. The blessing of courage pushes him away, and the creature falls dead, leaning against the tree. Meanwhile, the gods discuss among praises and criticisms, and he realizes he has leveled up to level 2, celebrating the achievement. Thanks to the new blessings of acceleration and command, he looks at his two companions and acknowledges their usefulness. A distant scream catches his attention, and the others, deluded by faith, attack the monster in the name of their goddess, finishing it off together. The blonde girl thanks, happy to have reached level 2, while the others watch in frustration. She reflects on how wonderful she is, and a god stares at her intensely, causing her despair. Distressed, she denies being in an abusive relationship, at which point a god of beauty grants her the blessing color of beauty. Excited, the young woman considers the blessing perfect for herself, and the boys promise to protect her, saying that this is a man's duty. Grateful, she decides to trust them, which makes some other boys uncomfortable. 2 of them claim they can no longer help Choi the gangmen, leaving him confused, and they decide to support Mayan from now on. Choi praises her strategy and joins 2 other girls to hunt, both of whom agree. The gods continue to observe the heroes while Yu falls to the ground. Trying to rise after dropping the sword, the knoll takes the opportunity to grab the weapon, but she convinces herself that she can win, casting a fire spell that incinerates the monster. Exhausted, she collapses, but upon checking the status window, she notices she is at level 2, and considers it a great start. The gods cheer for her and she thanks them, analyzing her blessing from the martial god. A second monster approaches from behind, but she recovers the weapon and slashes the knoll's chest, blocking the attack with the sword. Taking advantage of the opening, she conjures flames over the enemy, and with a decisive strike, brings down the creature. Tired, she feels her body recover and levels up to level 3, radiant. In another part of the battlefield, Choi watches everything, impressed, while the blonde girl looks at him curiously, and each leads their group further ahead. The protagonist holds a knoll and splits it without delay. The little deity questions how many have already died, but he prefers not to answer, knowing he has easily surpassed the mark of 1,000. Sitting on one of the bodies, the young man follows the window during the fights, and notices another curse emerging. Looking up at the sky, he concludes that he cannot level up because of the goddess curse. The hero's curse reduces his experience, and this leaves him distressed. The deity comments on the stars, confusing the boy who thinks it is just irony. He returns to the status panel, questioning the curse that makes him instill fear in friendly races. Downcast, he feels even more excluded, something that pleases the young god. Looking down, he finds a gold bracelet, and with his pouch already full of coins, decides that he will also grow strong through the power of wealth. Other monsters approach, and several armed gnolls swear to kill the scary meat. Despite feeling confident, he is surprised to see so many gnolls gathered. Kong notices that one of them is level 9, and has the warrior blessing. Smiling, he realizes that the monsters have devised a strategy, as they cannot defeat him just by numbers. Filled with hatred, they all charge to devour him, but he dodges with a leap, and still thanks. After all, he now has several teachers who sought him out of their own will. Upon seeing him, the gnolls ask if he is one of them, but with a single blow, the protagonist nearly splits one in half. Looking back, he thanks again for having learned to handle his own power. The creatures, cautious, feel threatened by the strength of that human. Proud, Kong asserts that, regardless of what they do, they will remain weak. Later, the young man accumulates a huge amount of gold, but faces problems in negotiations due to the language. Needing a translator lying on the ground, he concludes that the gnolls are trustworthy precisely because they are terrible liars. Then, a demon appears from behind, asking who took care of the gnolls. Surprised, the boy sees the man confused for having called him idiot human, but the sentence is interrupted when the protagonist grabs him by the shirt. Excited, the young man comments that he finally got a smart translator and confuses the demon with a humanoid gnoll. The other, irritated, insists that he is a demon, not a gnoll. Confused, the young man thinks that demons would be very powerful humanoids. The kidnapper goddess had said they would need to defeat the leader of the demons, the king. If the gods asked for help, it is because the demons are strong, but that one didn't seem so scary. Furious, the demon complains that you don't hit someone and then ask for friendship, also explaining that not all demons are extraordinary. Blandly, the boy apologizes, saying he is weak, which almost makes the demon cry. Trying to maintain his composure, the man comments on the protagonist's strange strength, which, happy, he attributes all to his blessing. The demon, however, replies that he has more curses than blessings. Astonished, the young man discovers that the stranger possesses the observer's blessing, capable of seeing others' status windows. The protagonist understands, and the other asks to be released. But the boy says that this is just a different way of making friends, further irritating him. While staring at him, Kong comments that he is shrewd, and the demon explains that, being a dark mage, he really needs to be clever. At the moment, he was training to get married, which leaves the boy completely confused. In a mocking tone, the man asserts that he is old enough already. The little deity, excited, encourages the boy to ask more questions about the demon's life. Enthusiastic, he wants to know why he hasn't married yet, but the other, filled with rage, replies that he would rather die than become a toy for humans. Jokingly, the boy comments that it would be a shame to die without knowing the pleasures of the flesh. He explains that more powerful demons can have multiple wives, but, being weak, that one fled to avoid ending up as the husband of some random demoness. The young man feels pity, but the demon asks him not to feel anything. Then, he asks how he is still able to move, leaving Kong confused. The mage reveals that he used a paralysis potion that would affect even a fairy, but the boy, despite being level 1, remained unharmed. Upon seeing the vial, the boy immediately remembers Crimson. Gritting his teeth, he curses the demon, who looks frightened. Smiling in a disturbing way, Kong recalls something extremely annoying. He laughs while holding the demon firmly. A magic begins to rise up the boy's leg, but dissipates before reaching his head threateningly. He asks what the other is trying to do, and the mage, in panic, screams upon realizing that his sealing spell has failed. The young man remains silent, increasing the tension. Then, he asks what the demon's relationship is with the former leader. Smiling, the man considers the question absurd, as he has met several leaders. However, the protagonist specifies he speaks of the leader who had a knoll trapped to his chest. The mage's expression darkens, and he remembers a human on the brink of death with a tragic story. As he begins to explain that he saved that young man from the curse, the protagonist interrupts him, filled with rage, recognizing the dark mage who helped Crimson, now standing right in front of him. Elsewhere, the heroes gather. The unhappy saint warns that the other boys have given up and returned to the temple. Resources are now directed to those who remained, which cheers the group. Elsa's comments that leveling up 3 times a day is impressive, praising the saviors, although he knows that the true wonder is the hero's blessing. Soon, someone calls for the young man. A knight warns about a knoll feeding while the order is busy. The woman asks the creature's level, and he replies that it is 5. She reasons that there are 3 adventurers at that same level, and the prince confirms, considering it a good opportunity for experience. Thus, everyone follows him as they approach the monster. The prince asks for silence, explaining that, although it seems foolish, it is strong and loves to fight. The princess mentions that a knoll can use dark magic when satisfied, recommending caution when its eyes turn red. Despite the caution, the monster notices them, and she apologizes for being discovered with red eyes. The knoll roars. The prince is stepped back, wishing good luck to the boys, who feel apprehensive. Using his command blessing, Choi tries to calm them, thinking of buying time. As the knoll prepares, he asserts that the creature must be slow, but in a swift leap, it is already before them, frightening the young man. An explosion occurs, and one of the boys calls for the injured companion. The knoll growls, charging at the heroes and throwing them away until a fire spell hits its face. Yu is tense but focused, preparing to attack cunningly. She lunges with her sword, but does not see something approaching, and receives a knee to the stomach, spitting blood. With no time to react, the monster grabs her and throws her against the blonde. With the young woman in his arms, the girl trembles, unsure of how to act. Stammering, she tries to ask for help. The knoll approaches, and her charm blessing activates as she pleads and cries. The monster catches the scent and extends its hand, licking its lips, until a cut opens its neck, splattering blood on the girl's face. The prince asks if the little heroine is okay. She still trembles with fear while an innocent god sighs in relief. An evil god shows frustration, and a water goddess washes her face. The prince looks back, praises the courage of the young ones, and wishes that the deities bless them. In another location, the demon bleeding on the ground claims that the protagonist is worse than a demon for swinging him like a rag. Frighteningly, the boy calls him, and he tries to say he cannot fulfill the request. The young man laughs and asks if he wants to die, leaving him terrified. The horned one then conjures a spell that heals him and cleans his blood. Irritated, the boy says that out of pity for the leader, he almost died. He wants to know if he will receive help, but the demon mentions a saint in the nearby town and says he doesn't want to die before getting married. Tense, he agrees to help and take him to another city. The protagonist smiles, as he does not want to stay where there are servants of the goddess. As they walk, the demon suggests a shortcut to avoid checking their identities. The boy sees no problem, since he would also have difficulties not speaking the human language. The god, for his part, finds it amusing. At another point, the redhead comments that MANHWA might be useful, but it's strange that he doesn't know where a public bathroom is. The boy thinks that this kind of detail never appears in mangas and novels. Moreover, she has been paying for the lodging, armor, and even for his weapon. Suddenly, the girl stops and says she is bothered by the fact that he is staring at her intensely from behind. Convinced, MANHWA says he likes walking behind people, thinking that a beautiful girl is taking care of him, a complete stranger, thanks to his protagonist's blessing, as they get closer. She states that she was surprised when he tried to attack a slime and comments that he must not have a brain. Even trying to defend himself, the young woman warns that they are in orc territory, more dangerous than that of the gnolls, and asks for caution. He agrees, but she doubts his understanding. Smiling, he assures her that he understood, and they stare at each other. Even the gods gather to watch them, and he believes he will gain more blessings. The redhead, not understanding, tells him to stop laughing and stay alert, as that territory is dangerous for rank slime mercenaries. Excited, he looks at his ring, thinking he has gained a blessing that gives experience bonuses. Despite the risk further ahead, he asks if they are in the right place, since there are no gnolls around, which she also finds strange. MANHWA comments that things like this happen to protagonists, but she doesn't understand. She opens a scroll, certain that they could complete the mission of collecting gnoll ears. Confident, the young man suggests exploring more of the forest, but the girl recommends seeking more information at the guild. He asks her to trust him, and she, scared, questions his confidence. Suddenly, an axe flies towards him, but he dodges. Fallen on the ground, he watches in shock as the redhead encourages him to get up and face the gnoll. However, his sword does not pierce the creature's armor. She realizes it is a gnoll named by the steel armor and asks if he can stand. Others approach, and the warrior tells him to pay attention while she distracts them. He hesitates, worried about the experience, and she tells him to stop with the jokes. Before he can respond, he gets hit by a stone and becomes dizzy. As he falls, the young woman calls out to him, but he only thinks it's strange, being the protagonist. Suddenly, he wakes up startled and asks about the gnolls. The redhead, dirty, says she took care of all of them, but he notices that she has lost an arm. Terrified, he asks if it was because of him, but the girl claims it was her own fault. With the weight of guilt, he wonders how he can continue as a protagonist. Desperate, he tries to use his blessing to heal her, but she asks him to calm down. Smiling, she says the fault is hers, while he realizes that his blessing only exempts him from responsibility. Up above, the gods laugh and punish him with a curse of limited vision. He does not understand what is happening, and the redhead, worried, wants to know if he is okay. She notices that he is acting strange and talking to himself. He realizes he cannot see her status window. Angrily, he falls to the ground, frustrated with the dream of traveling with a beautiful girl. Confused, she states that the forest is dangerous and suggests they go back before more gnolls appear. He agrees, remembering that the saint in the town can heal her arm and promises to take responsibility. Elsewhere, Kong asks the demon's name. The man, irritated, says he is Cogmus, the 23rd son of the 348th wife of the Demon King. Although royalty is determined by power, they do not value status. Kong laughs and describes him as an ordinary demon. Noticing the other's sadness, he apologizes and asks how he prefers to be called. The man recounts that an old friend, now the wife of the 7th Demon King, used to call him Moss. However, he never managed to congratulate her on her son. The story irritates Kong. He feels pity for the demon but considers his own journey more tragic. Bored, the god tells them to leave the forest soon. Kong notices his strange behavior, especially after being aggressive with the fairies. Moss, looking down, notices something. He announces that they have arrived, leaving the boy confused. They are already close to exiting the forest, but the demon warns not to let their guard down. Ahead, they will enter the realm of the Swordmaster Knights, which intrigues Kong. Moss confirms that it is also orc territory, which surprises him. He imagines that there might be someone interesting over there. However, the demon warns that the orcs are stronger than the gnolls. Observing the cliff, the two spot the orcs. Kong is impressed to see them taming animals. Suddenly, an orc catches the scent of a human. Licking their lips, they become eager to feast. The orcs spot the travelers and Moss blames the young one, who does not understand. The demon explains that his eyes shine in the dark. The boy admits he forgot, leaving Moss astonished. After disabling the glow, he asks if it's better, but the demon becomes furious because he didn't do it earlier. The boy just laughs and Moss calls him an idiot. Soon, several orcs approach. Activating the glow again, the young man says he sees better this way. At night, he counts that there are only 10. Confident, he states that they seem relaxed. Moss explains that they are underestimating the boy because he looks like a tired mercenary. Kong jumps from the cliff and tries to talk. Moss sighs, allowing him to do as he wishes. With determination, he calls out to them. The orcs call him Piggy and demand his belongings. He gets irritated and says he is human. Surprised, one of the orcs comments that the Piggy speaks their language and warns the others. Kong thinks they are more communicative than the gnolls, but still hard to deal with. Preparing his dagger, he remembers that Moss said they are stronger. Pulling out the weapon, he orders them to hand everything over. An orc becomes furious and says he is an orc, not a pig. Then the young man attacks him in the chest. He wonders if he will be able to defeat them, but remembers the blessing of the excluded. Smiling, he says he will show who has pig blood. Kong throws the dagger and hits one of them in the head. The orcs argue about who will face him. The young man stares at them with red eyes. He asks Moss if they weren't stronger, and he affirms that the bizarre one is the boy. Pulling the dagger back, Kong says they are not strong. After cleaning the weapon, he comments that it was easier than it seemed. Turning around, he complains that Moss should be more useful, until he notices something. Seeing the demon's legs burning, he asks what is happening. Confused, Moss just says it looks dangerous. He asks Kong to look at the sky. The young man obeys and sees a huge dragon flying. Curious, he asks where it is going, and Moss says there is a saint over there. Confused, the protagonist confirms, and the demon explains that it is expected for humanity's greatest weapon to detect from a long distance. The fairy kingdom is in that direction, so something serious must have happened. Relieved, Kong says he survived, but considers it bad luck to encounter it now. Although the boy warns about the burns, the horned one downplays it and states it will take time to heal, suggesting that the protagonist carry him. The young man refuses. After a silence, he reflects on his experiences and on helping a demon. The god comments that he should have been handed over to the orcs, but the protagonist disagrees. Moss says the situation is reciprocal, as his reputation would be at stake if they found out a demon accepted help from a human. Kong laughs and threatens to spread this, which makes the demon question his humanity. Kong claims he is not ordinary, almost becoming a hero, leaving Moss surprised. Confused, the protagonist mentions his status window and the demon is astonished, as the hero's curse is usually imposed on demons. The curse prevents level increase, rendering a demon practically dead. The young man understands that the other's revenge is impossible. Moss wants to know how he became so strong just with the fairy's blessing. The demon has never heard of the blessing of the excluded and asks for explanations, but Kong warns him about the risk of falling. Moss is unaware of the blessing but recalls a similar curse. Irritated, the protagonist realizes that the demon does not understand the true meaning of excluded and feels uncomfortable with the observation of his status window. Thinking about the blessing, he questions if everything will return to the beginning. Moss concludes that the blessing prevents hunger or fatigue because everything resets. The young man agrees, and the demon says it sounds more like a curse. Kong notes that the accumulated experience also resets. Curious, Moss asks how he keeps getting stronger, intriguing the protagonist. Then the boy consults the god, who recalls the past. Leaving him confused in another location, an irritated young man asks about the hero's defeat. Choi Gangmin tries to calm him down, but a prince intervenes, stating that the gnolls are strong but will be defeated as they level up. The newcomers nod. Disheartened, the prince reflects on the hero's levels and the scarcity of gnolls. A guard informs that the dispatch troop has not been found, suggesting the intervention of knights. The prince considers that only one person might have done the job but dismisses it. He orders the heroes to prepare to face orcs. Even during the investigations, a tired adventurer arrives at the temple, surprising the prince. Recognized as Ohanwu, he seeks the saint, and everyone is surprised that he trained alone. Exhausted, he asks about the saint. While the prince asks him to calm down, he apologizes, saying that the life of the girl he was carrying was at risk. Princess Rosinia is surprised to see him. The mercenary dismounts from MANHWA's back, stating she wants to retire, while the princess notices the absence of the redhead's left arm trying to disguise it. The mercenary downplays the incident. The hero smiles and asks to be taken to the saint. Upon finding her, she wants to know the reason for the confusion. The prince explains that Ohanwu has returned. Before he can ask for anything, two spears block him. The guard orders him to stop, and Hanwu pleads to speak with the saint. She is surprised that he is low level and still cursed. He tries to divert by mentioning a great companion. The saint looks at the redhead, notices a noble blessing, and assumes she is the daughter of a duke. Still, she finds it lacking. The young man shouts that the redhead protected him with her life, so she is valuable. The saint asks him to look around and mentions Templars and level 30 knights who would also sacrifice themselves. She questions how the girl can be excellent in front of them. Hanwu tries to argue about her pure heart, but the saint wants a concrete justification. He thinks until he shouts about her potential. She understands, saying that in a few years, she will be a beautiful young lady. He agrees but insists on the redhead's talent. The saint reminds him that his friends evolve while he remains level 1 and says that this is true talent. Hanwu looks at his companions, trying to respond, but freezes at the thought of mockery. The saint asks again if he has anything to add. Embarrassed, he tries once more. Using his special blessing, he says that Arya is a unique companion and pleads for her arm to be healed. The saint refuses, breaks his blessing, and demands that he prove his worth before asking for anything. She asks why she should pay the debt and, kneeling with a sarcastic smile, states that he underestimates the miracles of a saint. A priest reads a scroll listing gifts from the fairy nation for healing. Impressing everyone, the saint says this is proof of worth and challenges him to do the same. Desperate, he asks to be considered an investment, promising to grow quickly. She interrupts him and says she will talk when he is strong, leaving him dejected. Hanwu hears the laughter of his companions, who ridicule him. He hallucinates with mockery, shouting that it's a lie. The gods call him an imposter. Suddenly, a student asks the saint to keep the red-haired swordswoman as a companion. The saint recognizes the girl's ignored potential and decides to make an exception. Smiling, she asks to see the redhead's arm, and the young woman agrees. A light envelopes the limb, and the saint declares that the swordswoman will be the sword and shield of the heroine, asking her to never forget that. Arya cries upon seeing her arm restored. The saint asks what she is waiting for. The white-haired girl tells her to go to the side of the heroine, and Arya understands. Sighing, The saint tells the prince that they have wasted too much time, and asks to speed up the plans. The blonde agrees. The young people leave, wishing Hanwoo good luck, who stays behind. Even the prince hesitates. Outraged, the hero shouts and curses. However, someone extends a hand and asks him to lift his head. The princess says that he may not realize it, but he is not wrong. Smiling, she thanks him for bringing Arya and saving her childhood friend. Hanwoo is shocked, holding his hand. She gives him a symbol of gratitude and asks him to be her second apprentice. A magic circle appears on his back, and he receives the blessing of magic. But the title of second apprentice intrigues him. She bids farewell, wishing him the best, and departs. The young man looks at his own hand, not understanding. Blushing, he does not notice the prince's interest. The gods, surprised, applaud, and sarcastically praise. Excited, Hanwoo starts everything over. Meanwhile, the orcs are defeated. Kong advances and kicks one of them who tries to talk. He says it's just another horde looking for trouble. The orcs do not call for reinforcements, but the flat terrain makes hiding difficult. Looking back, the young man notices something. A goat tries to eat the equipment on a cow, and he tries to stop it, thinking about the rewards from the orcs. Laughing, he offers something to the animal. Moss comments on the boy's animation. Kong is impressed, but the demon asks to be released, now recovered. The young man frees him, questioning the rapid regeneration, but Moss doesn't want to play. Kong notices that the horns are hidden, and he explains it's a magical trick to enter the cities. The protagonist asks why he didn't hide them earlier, and he says it would hinder his regeneration. Moss panics upon seeing the goat eating his clothes, while Kong thinks his concern is exaggerated, as he is smarter than a gnoll. Even so, the young man gets irritated with the delay in reaching the city. Suddenly, they hear sounds. A carriage is fleeing at full speed, chased by orcs demanding belongings. The caravans are surrounded, and the leader orders them to stop the knight's attack. Leaving a lord desperate, he says it is dishonorable to face the orcs like this, and orders the attack. The knights are decimated in moments. Kong observes, and Moss asks if he isn't going to help. The boy replies that, despite being a demon, he didn't want to marry a little old demon lady. And Moss understands. They decide to just watch, and the former horned one calls him heartless. The orcs surround the carriages and laugh in front of the most valuable one. The knights try to protect it. Sensing the smell of a female, an orc informs the leader, who orders to take the food and leave. Suddenly, the door opens, and a pair of girls appears, surprising the orcs. They laugh, saying they would let them go if they weren't foolish. Speaking in an unknown language, one of them conjures fire, sending fireballs, while the other advances with a sword surrounded by a blue aura. She strikes from top to bottom, causing an explosion combined with the fire. The soldiers get excited. Kong comments on the strength of the swordswoman, but Maz downplays it. The young man says he didn't think it was cool, and the demon asks if he didn't like that the humans survived, but he denies it. Preparing himself, he laments not being able to avenge them. Observing the girls, he believes they are part of the elite and that it would be advantageous to ally with them. Then he shouts about a pretty pig. He knows the humans won't understand, but the orcs will, leaving Maz confused. Smiling, he predicts that things will get more fun. The mage looks confused, and the swordswoman interrupts the attack. In the distance, a huge number of orcs appear, attracted by the shout. The knights and the old man scream desperately. The mage observes the approaching orcs and comments on something strange. Impressed, Maz praises the boy's cleverness in using his curse to attract the monsters. Pulling out the dagger, Kong decides to save the girls. The god suggests letting them die, but he asks for understanding. Surrounding the young women, the orcs claim they are tired. The leader, smiling, orders to kill the others and take the two. The warrior notices something, and the young man comments that it is impressive. Kong observes, convinced that they would manage, and that he should have waited longer. Distrustful, the mage asks who he is. The boy smiles, mocks, and says he is an apostle of an excluded god. Unintentionally, he throws an orc into the air, leaving the girls scared. Observing his fingers, he finds it amusing, yet strange. Suddenly, a cut passes in front of him. The orcs charge fiercely, but Kong dodges various blows. Smiling, he notices space between the attacks until Mose warns him. An orc charges from afar and hits him. The demon shouts that he was reckless against a red orc, but the young man pierces the creature's chest. He sighs, admitting to being startled by the sudden attack. With his hands surrounded by aura, he asks what he should have been careful of. The demon says it's nothing. Observing the orc, he notices the sudden color and realizes he should have studied before killing it. The soldiers cheer and say something he partially understands. He realizes they are thanking him for saving them. He recognizes some words, as he studied a bit on the way. The god, annoyed, says he should kill them all fairly, but the young man asks for patience. The orcs believe he is tired. Suddenly an arm flies towards him. Upon touching the hit spot, he realizes it is an orc's limb. Excited, he says that those who can turn red should raise their hands, and the monster asks how the piglet speaks their language. The young man tells them to be quiet since they can't. Sometime later, the last orc falls. Mose approaches and asks if everything is okay. And the boy confirms. However, the demon wanted to know about the others who are scared. Embarrassed, Kong thinks he used too much null power and asks Moss to handle it. Advancing, the demon grumbles and introduces himself as the wizard Cogmus, while Kong is the swordsman Kong Hansu, who doesn't speak the common tongue. The protagonist thinks Mose is useful and invented a convincing story. Worried, the mage asks him something. Smiling, the demon explains that Kong has the hero's curse, but also a blessing from the fairy. A great symbol of trust. The boy thinks it was worth losing his first kiss for this. Filled with anger, he blames the goddess, while the girl approaches. The demon says she apologizes for suspecting her savior. Excited, he understands, believing he has found a good translator and finally the trust of the natives. The god does not like the direction things are taking, and complains, saying that the traitorous apostle deserves death, and Kong was already expecting this. Then, he decides to reveal a secret to the god. Later, Kong watches the campfire. The god grumbles, saying that being impotent is not a sin. The boy blames the blessing, but is thankful for not being angry anymore. The blessing of the excluded is powerful and has a condition to strengthen, reset all statuses. He reflects that it means absolutely all of them. Depressed, he says he hasn't done much for some time. The swordswoman approaches and calls him. Kong remembers that her name is Julia, a noble who studies at the Fantasy Academy. Awkwardly, he finds it hard to talk since the translator is asleep. What catches his attention is the fact that she calls him and sits far away, thinking she is dismissing him. She calls again, startling him. Drawing her sword, she creates an aura around it and shows it. Then, she asks him to show his, focusing it on his finger. Kong demonstrates, leaving her surprised. The young woman approaches, asking something he doesn't understand until she seems to notice something and apologizes. She bows, seeming to ask for forgiveness, and the boy doesn't understand anything, thinking she didn't like it because it was small. He concentrates the aura on the dagger and asks if it looks better. Relieved, she says something incomprehensible and runs away, leaving him there. Awkwardly, he just smiles. Frustrated, he says it's hard to understand women's hearts. The god states that an impotent person doesn't need to know that. Returning to the temple, the boy is prevented from entering his dormitory. MANHWA says he is a hero, but someone explains that he has failed, leaving him confused. A priest states that by leaving the temple, the young man lost support and now has three choices. The first is to receive an independent fund and give up being a hero. But if discovered, he will be executed, which frightens him. The second is to return to training without receiving anything until he evolves, but he refuses out of fear of humiliation. Then he asks about the third. The last option is to surrender his body to the temple and marry a noble. Unable to leave until he dies with his hand on his chin, MANHWA chooses the first option, as he doesn't want to live trapped. The saint extends a paper for MANHWA to sign, explaining that it is a contract to protect the reputation of heroes. Soon after, he receives the independent fund and a new identity, being surprised at how different this is from the novels he knows. The old man finds the comments strange and asks what he meant. But the young man disguises it, claiming he is talking to himself in the stories he read. Protagonists who abandon the kingdom are treated as hypocrites. Yet for him, this situation seems like a great opportunity. Then, he smiles and asks if he can use the money as he wishes, receiving confirmation from the priest upon leaving the temple. He even considers marrying a noble, but ultimately decides to follow the path of a true hero. Thus, he heads to the slave market, accompanied only by an immature god. Elsewhere, someone runs to the saint and informs her that MANHWA has deserted. She, although hurt, sees the reduction in the number of heroes as somewhat beneficial in a sense. There are 2 saints across the continent, but when the true war begins, she will have to face everything practically alone. The priestess comments on the drastic decline in the number of gnolls, and the nun mentions rumors about a mysterious order of knights. Then she questions whether a single order would be able to handle so many monsters, but the subordinate suggests the hypothesis of an elite squad. The saint dismisses the idea, saying that not even the fairies could achieve something like that, and begins to fear it might be the work of the Demon King. The nun apologizes for the hasty theory, but the woman claims that the real danger is judging without evidence. Still, she orders an investigation to confirm if there is involvement from the Demon King. Watching the nun walk away, she reflects that everything happened at the western border, far from the demonic territory. Soon, someone interrupts her thoughts, bringing a message from the academy, inviting the heroes to celebrate the school holidays. The saint is shocked that they know about the summoning of the heroes and asks how they came by this information. The old man explains that a student saw MANHWA's status window at the mercenary guild. She laments having allowed him to act alone, believing he would end up returning to the temple. On the other hand, she considers it good that the fame of the summons spreads, even though they are still weak. Thus, he instructs the old man to respond that they will take the academy's suggestion into consideration. Suddenly, another person appears breathless before her, informing that they found a bag with a hero's belongings, leaving the saint intrigued. In another scene, Kong relaxes in a cart and asks if the girls hired mercenaries. Mose confirms, and a knight approaches wanting to know details about that group's training. Kong finds the approach rude, and the demon asks if he is uncomfortable with the man's greed. Although he doesn't fully understand the situation, Cogmus warns him that it's rude to inquire about others training. The young man, curious, asks if mercenaries are always so shameless, and his companion replies that they tend to fight over silly reasons and end up dying young. Intrigued, Kong wants to know why they choose this lifestyle, and Mose reveals that the mercenary blessing allows gaining experience by completing missions. The boy reflects on this while discreetly observing another adventurer. Then he opens his hero curse window but finds no penalties preventing experience from missions and achievements, only from hunting. Mose, interested, asks what he is analyzing. In response, Kong holds the demon's shoulder and asks Cogmus what it takes to become a mercenary, believing he has found a way to get stronger. Later, already in the city, he smiles and shouts through the streets that he has completed his long journey, finally reaching his goal. However, the enthusiasm fades when the smell of the place invades his nose. The demon explains that many are travelers who haven't bathed in days, and reminds that Kong himself is even worse after the orc bloodbath. The young man complains about the rudeness but hears that he is, in fact, the smelliest in the area. Then he notices that the mercenaries have disappeared upon entering the gates. Cogmus comments that they probably went to drink or headed straight to the guild, but his partner gets distracted by fruits for sale, happy not to see meat everywhere. He suggests listening to what the ladies want, and Laisha says something that Hansu doesn't understand. Mose translates that the two wish to stay at the same inn, a request the young man accepts without problems. The deity becomes annoyed with the carefree attitude of the excluded one, who asks the god to be kinder. The young man asks if they should head to the guild soon, but the demon recommends a bath first. Due to the smell, only then does Kong smell himself and admit that the odor is terrible. In another part of the city, a slime cleans the protagonist's clothes and he smiles, comparing them to washing machines. His companion warns not to steal a creature of that kind, and Kong asks how much they are worth, discovering that each one corresponds to its own weight in gold. making them even more adorable in his eyes. Mose urges him to change clothes, explaining that he has already set aside some outfits. Kong, nauseated, doesn't understand how his friend hasn't arranged a marriage being so helpful. Sometime later, he gets irritated for needing to wear different clothes while the demon chats calmly with two girls. Kong and the god observe the scene, uncomfortable. Then someone descends the stairs, and the young man sees the ladies entering, catching the attention of all the men around. Julia and Laisha appear stunning, saying something that Kong doesn't understand. Kog'Maw lies, claiming that they just arrived too, which irritates his companion and bothers the deity. Soon after, the young man suggests eating something special, and the horned one points to a good restaurant. Excited, the two mention Kang's name, and Mose translates that they want to go wherever the young man wishes. The swordsman smiles, determined to eat well, while the demon laments that women always choose the strongest. The boy fills with confidence, but the god behind him emanates a dark aura. Meanwhile, MANHWA walks in shock through a slave market operating in broad daylight. He hears compliments about the physique of a captive, but the displayed man is completely dejected. Next, another guy pushes his line of slaves with blows, ordering them to move. MANHWA is not so surprised and tries to ignore the scene while the gods make bets up above. He observes the chains when someone recognizes him and calls his name. A young man asks if he also came to buy slaves, and MANHWA feels embarrassed. Then he notices the huge man behind his colleague, imagining that both had the same idea after being dissatisfied with the training. Suspicious, he states that it is a secret matter and wonders how the other didn't notice his absence right at the start. The acquaintance, however, decides to share some information so that both can benefit. Confused, MANHWA follows the explanation while the boy waves with familiarity. He reveals that by showing the hero window to the person in charge, he can gain access to the establishment's premium slaves. Then, he assures that he is not breaking the contract, as there is no way to hide the status, and MANHWA understands the reasoning tense. The young man realizes the serious flaw in the clauses he signed. Therefore, he decides not to reveal which slave he intends to choose, as his colleague seems untrustworthy. The bowl-cut boy suggests they meet at the inn, should MANHWA want to. He then smiles mischievously, admiring his friend's caution, but maintaining a good feeling. Disinterested, the hero says he is busy and separates from him. Still, the other insists, banging on the table, saying he wants to buy a slave. Immediately, the status window appears before the chubby merchant, who is startled to see a real hero. The merchant, grinning, starts calling him a legendary hero. The old man asks what kind of slave he is looking for. In his mind, he already plans to extract the largest sum possible, just as he had done with the previous client. In a burst, MANHWA bangs on the table and demands a strong warrior, confusing the merchant. The man then stands up, shouting that he has exactly an extremely powerful warrior in mind. He soon asks him to follow him to the back, where he will reveal the special slaves MANHWA follows. Impressed by the lighting of the place, he notices that they even dress the captives to make them look more presentable to customers. The merchant points to a cell and suggests looking at one of the women, and the young man decides to take a closer look. He sees defined arms, a cold gaze, and a threat in every movement. The slave in question was a bandit who robbed villages until she was betrayed by her subordinates and sold. MANHWA is shaken by the reality behind each chain. The old man praises the woman's strength and asks her to show her status window. She obeys, revealing the name Marasi and a slave curse. This curse is applied when someone makes an oath to a god, losing all rights, but also becoming incapable of betraying the owner, as long as the orders are reasonable. MANHWA hesitates. In light of this, the old man laughs, assuring that he will not charge a fortune, although the true price is not what worries the young man. In fact, he wants someone strong, with an imposing presence and a powerful body to protect him. The man insists that such a warrior will be a perfect shield, especially since the hero has the blessing of magic. MANHWA prefers to choose on his own and starts to think about how his special blessing can help in this decision. The merchant, seeing the sparkle in the customer's eyes, becomes even more excited. Sometime later, the young man announces that he has already chosen, Surprising the old man with his speed, the merchant nearly jumps for joy upon noticing that the hero selected 3 slaves at once. He agrees that all 3 have generous curves and are quite robust. He then tears up the old contract, nullifying all orders from previous owners. From now on, he declares that all serve the hero MANHWA. With the contract undone, the man warns that he must give clear orders, as there is always the risk of them trying to kill him or escape. Handing over the payment, MANHWA promises to keep this in mind, but firmly believes he will never be betrayed. The first stop after the purchase is a weapon shop. The 3 agree in silence. The hero lets out a mischievous smile. Meanwhile, the gods continue to enjoy the spectacle provided by the young man. Elsewhere, Kong is tense and struggling. Stuck in front of a form in a language he cannot write, he begins to sweat cold, regretting not having learned the local alphabet. He raises his gaze and sees the receptionist smiling warmly, which only makes him more desperate. With no one to sign for him, he nearly cries. Kogmo teases him, comparing the scene to mercenaries who cannot write their own names. He then slides a card and suggests that Kong just copy it. The young man finds all of this complicated, and blames the hero curse for his embarrassment. 10 minutes later, he finally finishes and smiles, happy to have succeeded. Despite his name being misspelled, the demon bursts into laughter at the human's foolishness. As he wonders why they are laughing, he sees the receptionist finalize the registration. Soon the status window opens, revealing a new mercenary blessing rank D, and he gets excited. Cogmus explains that this is a level equivalent to rank Ganal, asking him to be grateful to the 2 girls. After all, they were the ones who attested to his skills, and Kong asks to thank them in his place. The mage gets irritated, saying he should thank them personally if he could speak properly. Even so, Kogma smiles and suggests buying a children's book for literacy, an idea promptly rejected by the young man, who refuses to be treated like a child. Soon after, the 2 adventurers appear calling for the 2. Mozart explains the mission: subjugation of orcs with a reward proportional to the number of noses brought. Despite the nature of the task, Kong gets excited because he has 2 beautiful companions who can serve as bait. The god asks if there will be another massacre, but the swordsman assures that this time it will be a true annihilation. Further ahead, someone shouts Julia's name as she faces an orc. The swordswoman advances, but her sword is cut by the monster's attack. Even disarmed, the orc continues its advance and crushes her face against the ground. With effort, Julia lifts her gaze, until a fireball hits the creature. Leisha runs alongside her friend, worried, but the wounded one says she is fine and assures that she can still handle the monsters. The orc, however, gets up again, surprising the mage, and soon another enemy charges, frightening both of them. At that moment, Leisha remembers the people she has met, and Kong Hansu stands out as the most special, massacring orcs as if they were nothing. The young man smiles while simultaneously using the hero's curse and the fairy's blessing, easily taking down the creature. The mage observes that, due to the curse, he could be mistaken for a demon, but the blessing makes it clear that he is someone trustworthy. An orc screams something unintelligible, and Kong exterminates it effortlessly. The young woman tries to motivate her friend, who agrees to keep fighting. Sometime later, the swordsman continues killing monsters, while the mage pleads for a break. Kogma suggests a rest, and Julia thanks him, astonished by Hansis' endurance. When someone shouts her name, Julia realizes she was the first to ask for a break. Leisha jokes about how exhausted her companion looks, and the other blames her own outfit. Despite this, both recognize how extraordinary Hansu is. The warrior comments that the boy's sword technique is insanely heavy and should destroy him, but he sustains it all day. The mage doubts that this is possible, and the other admits she is not sure. Even so, the 2 smile happily as they see him approaching, hoping to rest. They notice the children's book in his hand and realize he is studying pronunciation. Julia celebrates reaching level 15, while her friend laments the level difference. The brunette reveals that she wants to reach rank B soon, and Leisha worries about the effort required. The warrior calms her, saying that Kong is focused on hunting and protecting them. The mage makes a comment about her friend's interest in the boy, and Julia blushes, saying she is focused on other things. Then the young man closes the book, announcing that they will continue the hunt, Leaving both anxious as a scholar, Leisha feels even more attracted and decides to help with the pronunciation of that strange language. Meanwhile, the saint, elsewhere, examines an object and asks if it is really that, receiving confirmation from the old man. Her eyes become cold and threatening inside a bag. The elder reveals items that clearly do not belong to their world, according to the report. They were found by a knight in the Knowles forest then. The saint asks who else knows about the existence of the bag, and the man replies that only the commander of the order is aware. She also wants to know if Prince Alces has been informed about the backpack. The guard assures that there was no chance for the prince to find out. As he was ordered to go straight to the temple, the woman decides that she will search the belongings of all the heroes, including those who have already left the sanctuary. She praises the soldier for his work, and states that he can serve the temple for the rest of his life. The man becomes apprehensive about this unexpected honor. The saint then explains that if he wants to avoid a premature and dignified death, he must forget everything about the bag. Nervous, he promises to dedicate his life to the temple, and the woman tells him to follow the priest. As soon as the two leave the room, silence falls over the place. Soon after, she picks up a small plaque from the table. She asks if anyone else heard the entire conversation. A blindfolded figure responds affirmatively, and the priestess orders them to learn the hero's language to translate what is written there. She warns not to disclose such information to anyone, and the masked one assures that they understood then. The saint reflects that all of this seems like a divine mistake, and considers covering up the case. Another assistant enters to report a major murder incident in a village located in the hunter's forest. The saint is surprised, as she believed the previous occurrence had already been erased from the records. The messenger, however, informs seriously that new bodies have appeared, and according to fairies and villagers, it is the work of a vengeful spirit. They say it would be the spirit of a stranger returning, which makes the priestess think. She wonders if this person, called a traveler by their clothes, would have attire similar to that of the heroes. After sighing, she makes a more rational assumption. Perhaps it is just someone seeking revenge, and for that reason, she orders the masked one to produce a composite sketch of the said stranger. In another part of the forest, Kong feeds the campfire with more firewood. He notices that everyone is already asleep. This makes the situation somewhat complicated for him. Now he needs to study with illustrated books made for children. The god observes the drawings and admits they are cute. Hansu asks if he liked them, and the answer is positive. Then, the young man questions the whereabouts of the other gods, but the little one says he doesn't know. Kong becomes tense as he needs to know where they are to avoid them. The spirit points in a direction, commenting that there are several divine presences at that point. He immediately remembers that this is the side of the temple mentioned by Kogmo, where the holy servant of the goddess resides. Therefore, he concludes that he needs to head northeast quickly and get stronger before any encounter. The little god, sulking, says he wants to read another book, but the young man insists on memorizing the current one first. Even so, the deity keeps asking for another, until Kong finally gives in at that moment. His eyes turn red as he notices something. He says they can continue later, as they have been surrounded by humans. Hansu declares that he will punish all who displease the excluded god. Then, he yells for his companion to wake up half asleep. The demon asks why, and the boy asks him to get up slowly, explaining that they are surrounded by several humans at the level of the girls. Gradually, he narrows his eyes, realizing they have fallen into an ambush. Moss asks how Kong knows the level of the people, and the swordsman replies that he learned this trick from the Knowles. Then, he approaches the companions, asking if they want to die, and Kogma suggests speaking more delicately. The two stand up startled, still not understanding. The young man is unsure if he said something wrong. Soon after, he feels another presence and warns that the people have arrived. Several men armed with swords and spears emerge from the bushes. One of them approaches and says something. The protagonist doesn't understand. Kong just gives a sly smile. He asks Kogma to translate, and the demon explains that they want everything the group took from the orcs, as they consider the area their territory. Moreover, he warns that if they resist, they will be killed, and only the girls can survive. Our protagonist is enraged by the machismo and elitism of those bandits. The adventurers say they need to kill them all, but Kogma is worried about the number of enemies. Kong whispers that he has been angry since the day he was summoned to that world, leaving the demon shivering, frightened by the contained rage. Moss realizes that the impending massacre will be brutal. The young man then notices he has more advantages than he imagined in that situation. He looks back, reflecting quickly. How difficult it would be to fight while protecting the two. He takes a deep breath and chooses the most effective method, shouting that there are strong girls there. He catches the attention of the old leader, who orders the archers to shoot at the young man. Kong blocks the arrows with his fist and charges at the chief, delivering a blow to the man's stomach, who spits blood. One of the archers realizes what happened and screams, but a green hand grabs him by the head. The orcs smile at seeing so many little pigs humans, terrifying the assailants. The leader of the monsters declares that the women belong to them and kills the archer on the spot. The other people finally notice the orcs and try to prepare for combat. The girls are surprised by the appearance of the monsters, but Kong positions himself in front of them, smiling at seeing the turn into a huge experience event. Hanzo charges without warning, cutting down anyone in his path all at once. He licks his lips, and his massacre curse comes into play, making the friendly races tremble in fear. One of the victims drops his sword, screams in despair, and calls for help, but is pulled back into the chaos. The still living human leader orders the protagonist's death, which only makes Kong more excited about having survived the first blow. Brandishing his sword, he tells the old man to get ready, but an orc leaps toward him. At the same time, two men attack the monster, thinking to take advantage of the confusion to hit the swordsman. Kong concentrates the aura in the blade and slices the nearest opponent in half. When he turns around, he realizes the chief has struck him from behind, receiving the direct impact. The main bandit laughs, convinced he has killed him. However, the young man responds with a wicked smile, saying he was just enjoying the new cloak. The man calls him a monster, terrified, until he is pierced by Kang's own arm. The body falls, and the protagonist observes the bloodied hand before looking in another direction. There, he sees the mage dealing with the opponents and the swordswoman facing both people and monsters with great skill. He scratches his face upon noticing the concentration and effort of the two. The god then taunts him, suggesting they return to the picture book, and Kong agrees to read more later at the guild. Everyone is shocked by the huge bag full of orc noses. The receptionist rolls her eyes, and Kong asks if that is enough for her. He complains that he could have gotten even more if it weren't for the maidens. But Mose points out that the two almost died from exhaustion. Hanzo calls for the young women and hands each of them a mission completion paper, surprising them and leaving them radiant. They thank him as they leveled up 2 times for hunting alongside him, and even Kog'Maw gained a level, considering thanking him as well. Kong smiles, opens his status window, and wonders how much he has evolved. To his surprise, he remains at level 1, which leaves him in shock. He stares at the screen in disbelief, then turns his neck towards the god and demands to know why the deity tries to disguise it and change the subject. Kong Suho begins to formulate a suspicion and lets out a high-pitched scream that echoes through the halls. Then, the narrative rewinds to the beginning of it all. In the beginning, the universe was empty until a star appeared from nothing. Over time, life emerged, and from that story, a peculiar god arose. Someone noticed the tiny glow as a deity, and living creatures began to pray for salvation, turning that light into one of the gods. Seeking to help, the entity discovered the joy and meaning of existence. Little by little, new deities emerged, from innocent children to cunning demons, each helping in their own way, as if participating in a competition. Meanwhile, living beings evolved in distinct ways. However, these countless lives could not understand each other and thus entered into conflict, dying in vain and disappearing as time moved on. In a certain cave, someone wounded spat blood. There, a god found a life about to end. The dying man sensed the divine presence, and the entity asked if he truly wanted to live. Through tears, the man begged for his life, saying he could not die like this. Then, the little god decided to help him, transforming him into a newborn baby. The child cried, confused, as the deity turned away, heading towards a small wooden cabin. Because of this, the elders were convinced to head to the cave to the west. Thus, the deity saved the young man, just as he had asked. The entity was satisfied with the outcome. After some time, the god visited the child again, who had already grown. He asked if the young man was well, and the young man wanted to know if he was the same god as before. The little one confirmed and asked if the human needed help again. However, The young man exploded in anger. He cursed the deity for losing the woman he loved by being transformed into a baby. The god was confused. As the other had never mentioned any wife, the man insisted that he could have avoided the marriage if he had remained an adult. The entity apologized. Irritated, the human demanded that the god take responsibility, causing him to flee. In the mind of the little deity, only the doubt about what he had done wrong remained elsewhere. A sailor offered something to a god asking for protection on the journey, making the wind god proud. In another corner, a war god encouraged fighters in battle. Still, that little one did not understand where he was failing as the centuries passed. He blessed countless lives, but in the end, all resented him, which only increased his confusion. At another moment, many years later, humans changed once again. People began to ask for strength and salvation, but saw the gods as mere tools. They created new rules like hero, demon, level, blessings, and curses. All the deities ended up adapting to this new system, except for our little god. Until one day, something different happened. A dying warrior cried out for a saint, but the woman beside him explained that the priestess had already left. He asked for at least a healing blessing. This man was Cain, a level 38 hero. In unbearable pain, he could no longer endure and questioned his own title of hero. Then, the god approached and asked if he wanted to be saved. The man accepted without hesitation. The deity warned him that he would lose everything, yet the wounded man preferred that to dying in vain. The little god became excited and began to laugh. Then he raised his hand to grant his blessing. As he was blessed, Cain felt that he still had some value in the world. He was happy to see his body fully recover. His plan was to return to the saint immediately, but he realized he had returned to level 1. The god merely commented that he had warned him. Still, Cain smiled for being alive and willing to start over. This relieved the little deity. Sometime later, however, the hero found himself confused. His former companions apologized for having kicked him out of the group since he could not level up. They told him to forget them, and the blessing began to sound like a curse. God did not understand the change, but the man no longer felt anything. Cain thanked the god who saved him, but left a piece of advice. The small entity listened attentively. He clenched his fist and said to never grant that blessing again, for it was a true curse. Thus, the ability that made a person return to level 1 became something he promised to never use again. This was devastating for the divinity. She realized she was no longer needed. Then, a long time passed. One day, the little god observed someone hiding behind a tree. He saw the protagonist wounded with an arrow in his leg. Thus, he found another young man about to die. Starting the story of Kong, everything happened because of the god's curiosity, who decided to bestow his blessing on someone who already bore the hero's curse. Even having changed the name to Blessing, he knew that resentment would return once the truth was discovered. Back in the present, Kong finally uncovered the secret. The divinity, as she had predicted, trembled in fear upon hearing the boy say that this was a terrible situation. He realized that even his levels were being reset and called himself an idiot for not noticing sooner. The little one was uncertain if the young man was angry. However, Kong merely sighed and suggested they buy another drawing book. Clenching his fist, the god began to pray desperately. This confused the boy, who thought the divinity wished for his death. The god, irritated, denied it. Then he smiled when the boy asked the reason for the prayer, and simply replied that it was a secret. Finally, in another place, Hanwoo stares at the sky, not understanding why he is lying on the ground. He suddenly realizes that the group is under attack. Just before, he had ordered Sarah to initiate combat. The blonde rushed forward with her sword, cutting a knoll with golden fur, and then commanded Kinna and Lusa to attack, which they did successfully. Throwing the creature, Hanwoo, euphoric, applauded the teamwork and encouraged them to keep it up. He imagined it would be easy to hunt with two girls stronger than the gnolls themselves, feeling that his investment in weapons had paid off. However, Sarah noticed that the monster was still breathing until it was engulfed by a hurricane of flames. The young man responsible for the attack felt a surge of confidence upon noticing the evolution of his magic. Soon after, Park Han-young appeared, praising the boy and offering help if needed. Still, Hanwoo warned him to hunt elsewhere, but Park refused. At that moment, The protagonist recalled the past when Park was a bully and decided to confront him, stating that no one would stop him in this world. Meanwhile, the girls prepared tensely, watched by the gods with excitement. Park's slave advanced, leaving everyone surprised. Hanwoo tried to organize a defense but panicked upon seeing his companions fall with a single blow. However, the girls got back up and Park explained that his slave had an extremely high level, demanding that Hanwoo surrender. His servants back to the protagonist. He flipped through a random book, nothing special, while his god suggested looking for another. The goal was to find a powerful weapon, but Kog'Maw warned that all had been confiscated. Kong mentioned ruins with forbidden excavations, but the Horned One warned that they were protected by knights stronger than Hanwoo. Frustrated, the young man stepped outside for air, thinking about his low level and the impressive strength of the knights. His god tried to cheer him up, but he felt on the verge of tears. Suddenly, an orc appeared to rob him, but Kong warned him that he was in a bad mood. The monster advanced, but Hanwoo, speaking in his language, told him to leave. The protagonist attacked the orc, hitting him in the chest. Kong prepared for another blow, causing an explosion and asking if the monster understood his anguish. Outraged, he shouted that there were no ruins to explore, losing hope in this world. As the monster was beaten, he begged the boy to stop. Desperate, the orc mentioned an unknown ruin. Kong halted the attack and began to listen to him. Crying, the orc admitted that there were several ruins and pleaded for him to stop the beating. The protagonist suspected it was a lie to survive, but the orc insisted on the existence of a great orc ruin. Kong ceased the attack and, smiling, asked to see this ruin. Still groaning in pain, the orc looked at the young man. In this fantasy world, monsters are used as a measure of power, knights with dragon levels, and orcs placed among those tiers. For the boy, this was enough, and he called the orc his friend. The monster, irritated, asked not to be called that, but the young man reassured him, saying it was lucky to find someone who spoke his language. The orc shouted that friends do not beat each other, but eventually accepted the human stubbornness. He decided to guide him to the location, but warned that someone as strong as Kong would not be able to enter. Kong questions the reason, and the orc explains that it has always been this way since he was born. Upon arrival, the boy and the god feel excited, but find only a grassy field. The young man looks around without seeing anything, until he notices something appear before him. The landscape suddenly distorts, revealing an abandoned ruin. The orc laughs at the boy's naivety, believing he had left. Kong, impressed, calls the monster, who is startled to see him there, as only people below level 9 can enter. The protagonist laughs. Claiming to be level 1, the orc tries to call him a liar when something flies towards him. Kong activates his ability, dodging arrows that pierce his backpack. Other monsters scream that it's lucky a weak human has entered there, in order to devour him. The protagonist wonders if the place is an orc village. They yell at him to blame himself for invading the sanctuary, but the accompanying orc tries to warn them. However, the orc is struck in the chest and bleeds violently. The young man warns that the monsters can either try to stop him or let him pass, but if they confront him, they will be beaten. Suddenly, he shoots forward with speed and jumps, hovering above the orcs with a threatening look. The monsters wonder if he is flying, while the little god prays for the souls of the orcs. Blood flies as they cry for help. With the sun set, 2 orcs search for the boy. As his scent is fading, they realize that half of the group has disappeared and swear revenge, running in a suspicious direction. Kong watches, wondering when this will end, reflecting on how many he has killed. While his god revels in the slaughter, his goal is to leave the place, but he seems to be walking in circles, assuming there is some condition to complete the dungeon. An orc atop the wall spots him immediately. Kong, seeing the monsters, runs in despair and realizes their urgency. They get stuck in the passage, questioning how the young man can resist so much. The protagonist smiles, provoking who will win in the end. The monsters are confused until they a devastating blow. Over time, they realize they underestimated Kong for being level 1, but defeating them was easy. The boy believes everything is resolved and that it was a good idea to bring the slimes to collect the items. Upon opening his status window, he sees that his curse massacre has risen to rank C, and another has appeared. Annihilation. The curse causes spirits to torment him in dreams, but his god protects him, scaring away the apparitions. The young man sees no problem as he cannot sleep, but the increase in the curse worries him. Although the god feels guilty, the boy states that it is just a curse he is frustrated for receiving another after saving some people. During the massacre, he ended up rescuing victims unintentionally. Kong steps down from the pile of corpses not understanding what they say and laments not having brought Kog'Maw. He then calls an orc, who pretends to be dead, and asks about the exit. The orc informs him that it is in the center, and Kong understands why he hasn't found it. Heading to the center, he questions if that is really the way, wondering about the existence of a portal. Suddenly, something shiny falls before him. A muscular orc asks if it was Kong who destroyed his home, frightening the saved people. The warrior demands an answer, and Kong questions if he is really an orc. The monster insists, and Kong admits to having tried to leave but was stopped. The hairy orc, furious, mentions the massacre of 300,000 orcs. Surprised by the number, Kong understands the delay. The orc introduces himself as the guardian of the city and his people, stating that Kong will not be able to leave. The young man, intrigued, throws his backpack on the ground and concentrates his red aura on the dagger, preparing for the attack. The guardian raises his trident, and their blows collide. Kong realizes the overwhelming strength of his opponent, who is far above his level. The orc tears off his arm in the blink of an eye, leaving him confused. The monster declares the fight over and envelopes Kong with a green aura. Throwing him away, the guardian acknowledges the boy's resilience, who avoided a fatal blow. Tired and bleeding, Kong faces the opponent, who notes that only an arm and an eye have been lost. The orc promises revenge for the 300,000 and says that Kang's death will be slow. The young man laughs as he shows his regenerated arm and eye, surprising the monster. They stare at each other in silence, and the guardian asks if Kong is immortal. The boy confirms, but the orc decides to imprison him until he dies of old age. Kong smiles as he realizes the problem. At night, in another location, someone calls for the heroine, Eubora. Arya enters, impressed by the girl's level 7. Eubora explains it's thanks to the hero's blessing. Arya comments on her noble rank be blessing, revealing her aristocratic background. Eubora is surprised, but Arya states that the blessing is useless without subordinates, complaining to her mother about not deserving it. The heroine thanks her for the advice, and Arya asks about the hero MANHWA, leaving Eubora embarrassed. The blonde laughs, uncertain about her feelings, until they receive news that the saint has come to visit. The redhead is startled by the time, but the saint apologizes and asks Arya for tea. The 3 moons illuminate the sky as the companion fulfills the request. The saint inquires if the heroine has trouble living there, but the girl denies it, leaving the saint pleased that she has adapted to the world, despite feeling tense. The woman comments that the other heroes are competing, worried about incidents, and wants to know of any signs, especially if there are indications of corruption. Eubora doesn't understand this possibility, and the saint explains that some may become corrupted by the blessings, perhaps some are already corrupted. The young girl asks about the fate of corrupted heroes. The saint explains that they remain heroes, so the temple cannot kill them, and corruption is a betrayal. Eubora remembers that Kong wanted to return to Earth because of his family, but something distracts her, leaving the saint confused. She wonders why she thought of him, imagining she made the right decision. The saint asks if the girl knows Kong Hansu, startling her. Eubora asks why, and the saint questions if he is her boyfriend. She replies that he is just an old schoolmate, piquing the saint's interest, who becomes eager to know everything about him, leaving Eubora lost. At the inn, the heroine ends up pressured to share gossip, awakening the curiosity of the gods. Later, in a dark room, the saint suspects the relationship between the two, as the young girl talked about him for hours. She sees Hansa's card, and realizes he refused to be a hero, being sent back by the goddess. If the information spreads, the deity's reputation will be tarnished, so she decides to hide the evidence. The arrogant goddess of benevolence appears, startling the woman, who quickly leaves. Desperate, she notices that the deity cannot locate the hero, even being responsible for the blessing, suspecting interference from another god. Now, she needs to erase any trace of Kong and gather information, but she didn't imagine that the boy's little god was watching her, understanding her plan and leaving silently. Meanwhile, in the ruin where Kong was, an explosion erupts, and the orc questions if he doesn't get tired, saying that everything is useless. Kong, fallen, begins to rise, laughing at the question confidently. He states that he will fight until he defeats him. The young man prepares to advance, and the monster, irritated, also charges, attacking with his golden trident, but the image fades. It was just a drawing on the ground. Kong thinks silently, analyzing the sketches on the ground and realizing he should have acted differently in the previous attack. While reflecting, someone approaches from behind, asking if he is okay. Kong recognizes Bruce, a level 9 mercenary and temporary leader of a group of natives. Confused, he doesn't understand the reason for the man's visit, who introduces a girl with brown hair. She bows in reverence. Leaving Kong bewildered, he punches the old man on the head, making him run away, asking for help. Kong asks if the girl is not leaving, and she replies that she will leave soon, while he turns away, indifferent. Startled, she notices the drawings, and that the young man has been planning for hours, but remains silent after a long time. Kong stretches and notices that it is already day. Convinced that his strategy against the Guardian is ready, upon noticing the girl sleeping, he questions why she stayed with him. He then realizes that she simply fell asleep. Jealous, the god demands that the young man stop paying attention to the woman, and he understands. Determined, he keeps in mind the need to defeat the orc. Soon, he calls the excluded god. He asks him to pay attention to something, imbuing the dagger with intense red aura concentrated. He opens his eyes. He demonstrates a fencing technique aimed at defeating the Guardian. He slides on the ground. He concludes the demonstration and asks the deity's opinion. The god is stunned by the technique. The young man comments that he practiced the day before, and asks the little one, who is impressed. The boy smiles, proud to have learned after being beaten by the Guardian. The god states that he is a maniac for having fun with this. Suddenly, the status window opens. He sees that a blessing and a curse have evolved, believing he has received a good reward for the training. Excited, he is pleased to see his blessing rank up, convincing the deity. However, his expression soon changes to anger. He realizes that the goddess has increased the curse's rank. He understands that this proves the divinity is likely watching him, aware that he did not die to the gnolls. He smiles and decides to confront the orc immediately. The Guardian, arms crossed in serious expression, asks if he will flee again, but the young man assures him he will not. The monster sighs, doubting the words of a human. Confused, the boy hears the orc invite him in to show the ruins. Climbing the stairs, he imagines that the orc is setting a trap. He insults the orc, who claims to never resort to traps, as he is a great warrior. Kong laughs upon realizing that he is trying to kill him inside the ruins since he cannot leave. He follows the monster, admiring its cunning. Impressed by the view of the ruins, he asks what is missing there, and the Guardian explains that it is a training ground for heroes of the past. Kong gets confused, thinking of hero orcs, but discovers that there were never heroes among them. The arrogant humans left the ruins filled with blessings. When he asks, he learns that this serves to restrict the entry of the strong. Angrily, the monster declares it impossible to reclaim his city with the young man alive. He spins his weapon and positions himself, assuring that the boy will die there. Serious and silent, the young man smiles darkly. He quickly asks a question to the Guardian. The orc responds threateningly. The young man inquires about treasures and weapons. The orc reveals the existence of weapons for newly formed heroes in that field. Startled, the protagonist questions how he will face a goddess with a beginner's weapon. He thinks he is in trouble, potentially dying with a single blow. With a strong stomp, the Guardian ends the conversation. He declares that he will kill the young man for the death of his 300,000 friends. The boy wields his weapon, trading blows. He fights on equal terms with the monster, smiling. He impresses the orc with his evolution. Noticing that Kong is approaching the exit, the Guardian screams furiously that he will not let him escape again. He launches an attack that the young man barely dodges. The boy faces him, revealing that he has been thinking of something since the previous day. He slides beneath the orc. He places his foot on the monster's belly and asks if he could escape the ruins. He kicks him, sending the Guardian flying away. The orc flies towards a golden portal as he crosses. The orc tries to understand how the portal appeared and realizes that Kong is a hero, shouting his name before disappearing. Kong looks at the portal, questioning if it really is the exit. The divinity is surprised, and the young man smiles proudly at his plan. Although he cannot level up, His focus is on the treasure. Kong moves through the ruins while the god excitedly points to the treasure. The young man asks if there is really something buried there. He approaches the shining objects but is disappointed by the quantity. The god explains that it is a sacred sword of a beginner hero, simple but full of divine energy. He wonders why they left it there, and the divinity replies that only heroes can wield it. Suddenly, the sword becomes heavy due to the hero's curse. Irritated, the young man breaks it, surprising the god if he cannot use it. Then no one will, which moves the divinity. Hansu throws all the weapons into the air and destroys them one by one with his bare hands. Irritated, he seems about to go mad as he destroys the last sword. However, he notices that this one is lighter than the others. The divinity identifies it as a defective sword, and the young man concludes that it is not affected by the curse. He thinks for a moment and decides to destroy all the other hero weapons. With an excited smile, he declares that being the last, it is no longer defective, praising the god for his logic. He chuckles lightly when the status window opens and sees that he received a rank E sacred sword curse, which irritates him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a girl calls for Kong Min, saying goodbye and promising to see him later with a saint. The boy waves, saying he is tired, and the gods encourage him to train. Happy with a new blessing, he considers it a good reward and decides to continue. Even tired, the hero realizes that the attention of the gods quickly strengthens his blessings. He smiles confidently, believing he will win the tournament in the future. His goal is to obtain the sacred sword as a prize. A god suggests focusing on other things, and the boy agrees. We see someone's imagination about heroes, demons, knights, and villains, typical of the romances read by the blonde. Mayan believes that taming a demon king is risky, but fun. Stressed, she shouts, asking why she should fight. A boy tries to calm her down, but she is rude, saying she didn't talk to him. Feeling bad, the boy apologizes. She dreamed of being protected by knights, but reality is different. Her shield A is shy and silly, B is clever and selfish, and C is just an excited sycophant. Tired, she thinks of using only these boys. With a fake smile, she asks for forgiveness, and the shy one forgives her immediately. One of them asks why they are there, and she reveals that she plans to choose a hero for the academy. The boys become tense and irritated with the existence of the academy in this world. Mayan confidently states that she will enter and start her true life. The chubby one calls her majesty and asks if anyone can enter. She explains that only the best will be chosen, 4 in total. The chubby one promises to eliminate any obstacle. One of them looks confused, and the young woman asserts that she wants all 4 to go together, making him suspicious. Mayan smiles, assuring sincerity. The boy says he doesn't want to clean up her mess as a boyfriend. She promises that won't happen, and if it does, she will grant any wish of his, surprising him. Zhang assures that the gods are watching and can confirm. One of them decides to accompany her, making the girl happy. The chubby one also agrees, promising to follow her to hell. With suspicion and pressure, the other finally agrees, and the girl celebrates. Back in the swords, however, upon reading the description, he realizes it increases the blade's resistance, questioning if it's really something bad. He thinks it might even be beneficial for his defective sword. Kong comments that he didn't expect a hero to destroy his sacred swords, leaving only one. Now strengthened by the curse, he calls the god to accompany him. Upon reaching where the orc disappeared, the young man wonders how to activate the portal. Suddenly, the guardian returns running. Surprised by the change, Kong extends his arm. Leaving the orc confused, the young man blocks the entrance. Realizing the monster will age outside the ruins, desperate, the guardian charges and Kong tests his new weapon, ripping off its arm, leaving the monster furious. The orc threatens, saying his youth has a price, and quickly regenerates his arm, ignoring the dead. He attacks the young man, but Kong, even faster, decapitates the monster. The boy is astonished by the regeneration, and the guardian roars in anger. The young man uses his ability and slams him against the ground, asking what he will do now. Impressed, Kong shouts, wanting to know if he doesn't die. He remembers that if he pushes him into a corner, the orc will die. Defeated, the orc offers help, proposing to move the city entrance closer to the sacred sword. which only heroes can wield. Kong asks if his sword qualifies, and the Guardian confirms, realizing the young man is also a hero. Over time, Kong asks to see his status window. The orc, calling him Sir, shows his screen and explains that the hero's curse arises from killing a hero. He claims to be immortal in the ruins. Being the final test for heroes, the protagonist assumes the orc is not a human guardian, but rather a protector of the orcs. Despite this, Kong asserts that he has lost. The monster becomes frustrated. Kong acknowledges his strength and says the hero must depart. The young man wants to leave but hesitates to trust the guardian. The orc points in a direction suggesting freeing other humans. Even tense, the orc accepts the direct request. Kong calls the humans to follow. The group talks among themselves, and he doesn't understand. The backpack is left on the ground, and only 3 humans agree to leave, thanking for the bag. Suddenly, the portal opens in front of Kong and the humans. He remembers the portal made by the goddess and fears being in danger again. The god pulls his hair. Irritated, Kong asks for confirmation of safety. The little one is furious, but the young man pleads for protection, cheering up the god. The guardian and the human look at each other while the little one peeks at the portal and asserts it is safe. The protagonist asks how he can return and receives the answer that the guardian will hear him if he speaks to the sacred sword. He thinks the monster is a charlatan, but at least the god confirms. The deity reassures safety again, and the young man decides to trust, extending his hand toward the portal. He closes his eyes while crossing and opens them slowly. Realizing he is in a room, he feels relieved that there is no lava. The others enter nervously. Kong tries to understand where they are until he notices a sacred sword on the wall. He then asks to open the portal again. He orders the humans to stay back, causing confusion. The deity watches, and the young man asks if the place is really safe. It is the room of a noblewoman with a sacred sword as decoration, a sign that she is not an ordinary person. Even so, the god assures safety, irritating the young man, who suspects it will become dangerous later. The god confirms that everything will worsen afterward, worrying the boy even more. Suddenly, Kong recognizes something familiar. His backpack is there. Meanwhile, in the hunter's village, the princess guides the heroes and asks them to be careful not to disturb the villagers. The boys look at each other, and the pink-haired girl advises not to disturb the saint. In another point, an old guide takes the saint to a crime scene, and she says it is clean. The man kneels, asking for forgiveness, but the woman says it is unnecessary. As she came because of a massacre, she asks if Celebless was imprisoned there, and the man confirms, frightened. The woman asks if he knows the importance of the elder. Making him tremble, she states that it is a problem for everyone, regardless of his knowledge. Observing the location, she remembers that Celebless creates powerful creatures, like the phoenix that gave her the title of Guardian of the Flame. Threatening, she asserts that interfering in the peace between humans and fairies is unacceptable, but that the person in charge has already forgiven what happened. The man thanks her emotionally. The saint asks for the name of the savior of the fairies to reward him, but the old man says he believes he is already dead. The woman shows interest in the appearance of the young man, and the mustached man reveals that the savior had short black hair. Like the heroes who visited the village, the woman becomes serious. She asks for the young man's name, but the old man does not know. Before asking more, a masked figure calls the saint, and the woman tells the mustached man to show the village to the heroes. The chubby man runs off. Upon understanding the order, the saint asks if the spirit is what they are looking for, and the masked figure confirms, believing he survived. The woman asks if he had a blessing, but says it does not matter, as no one at level 1 would kill a gnoll, and her heroes are proof of that. Even with an advantage, they were defeated by 2 gnolls, and a level 1 boy would never face so many. Moreover, the gods were in the temple, preventing the young man from receiving blessings. Still, the woman questions if the owner of the backpack and the spirit are the same person. Although it is dangerous, the saint smiles, saying she still controls the heroes at that moment. The goddess becomes anxious and displeased, assuring that she will not be discovered. She says that those who know the name are already dead, and has proof of it, changing the subject. The informant reports that news of the tournament has leaked, and the woman already knows, but pretends to ignore it. She explains that each person interprets information differently, and mentions that Jang Mi-hyun is changing a lot. The saint does not fully understand the reason for going to the academy, but states that she will do her best until the time comes. Anxious, she waits to see what the future holds for her. Suddenly, a drop falls on the armor of one of those present. Choi imagines it might be rain. Then, he notices the heavy sky and is that the storm will be strong. In the meantime, someone complains about the delay and the long wait. Soon after, Mi-hyun comments on the weight of her own armor, and the chubby man offers to carry it. The girl thanks him, and Choi is astonished by the consistency of her behavior. Even in that place looking at Eubora, the boy realizes that she has hardly changed. At first glance, everything seems calm, so he does not worry about the tournament. Still, something ends up catching his attention. A shadow appears at the edge of the forest and approaches. He immediately alerts the group to protect the princess, as Knowles could appear at any moment. The blonde girl is startled by the possibility of encountering another monster. Meanwhile, the blue-haired boy prepares, staring at the silhouette. Soon, a familiar glow reveals the form of someone. Arya jumps at recognizing the figure. It is their former companion. The hero Oh Han-woo. Choi stiffens. Analyzing the state of the newcomer, he remembers the boys saying that wounds are medals of victory. Kangmin comments on the boys' performance. Han-woo declares himself the symbol of a true battle, something none of them have experienced. The boy scoffs, calling it a stupid excuse. In response, the hero suggests they prove everything in a duel between the two. The blue-haired boy accepts the challenge and draws his sword. He wants to make clear the difference between their skills. The young man knows that the former colleague is on a higher level. Even so, he also possesses a new blessing. With his special power of vengeance, he believes the chances of defeat are minimal. Around them, people recognize the newcomer. They soon understand that Oh Han-woo will face Choi Kangmin. However, someone waves and calls the blue-haired boy. He asks what the problem is, and Arya admits she cannot prevent the fight. She remembers, worried, that Han-woo is still injured. The boy is pleased with her consideration. With a charming tone, he thanks the redhead for the warning, saying that this way he will avoid excuses later. Arya blushes, stammers, and claims it was nothing. This reaction makes the former companion even more irritated. At that moment, the saint approaches, commenting that the young man is causing a commotion again. She decides to heal the boy and asks the blue-haired one to finish the fight quickly with his sword charged with mana. He wishes to see what kind of skill his old colleague has developed. In silence, Han-woo receives the healing. He remains, however, even more disturbed, feeling that he is being underestimated. A few days earlier, in the forest, the young man lies on the ground, reflecting on the need to act with caution. He had seen his girls crying as they were taken by Park Han-young and vowed to rescue them. Suddenly, his system window opens. Then the blessing of revenge appears, making him stronger, and he assumes it is the power given to a betrayed protagonist. Despite this, his target will not be Park, as he considers him too great to be just a target of revenge. Instead, Choi Kangmin becomes the true nemesis in his mind. With a confident smile, the young man decides that there is only one enemy worthy of his revenge. He declares that this will be his new beginning, believing himself to be the protagonist of that world. Meanwhile, a cute blue slime crawls through the forest. Han-woo jumps on the creature. However, the slime gets easily irritated. Then it charges at the young man's stomach. The boy falls to the ground, and the little monster scuttles away, grumbling. Han-woo wonders if the level of slimes has increased, and a god asks if he is okay while recalling the hunting curse that weakens him. The young man gets annoyed for not being warned, but decides to ignore it and prepares his fire magic, stating that this is the fate of a protagonist. At that moment, an attack surprises him, followed by an explosion of flames. Back in the present, Choi notices that his colleague has improved, and Han-woo, smiling, asks if he fears his magic. Determined, the blue-haired one charges forward using his speed blessing. Han-woo casts a fireball, but the opponent dodges and is soon startled by a second explosion that hits him. Confident, Han-woo questions what he thought of the attack, but Choi, relying on his blessings, stands firm, advances, and asks if that was all. Eubora watches everything in surprise, while the wizard, irritated, launches several fireballs that do no damage to the opponent, who continues to wear a confident smile. Choi approaches, positions his sword, and goes for the strike. The boy tries to protect himself, but his special blessing activates, releasing lightning. Kongmin is confused by the intense light and the explosion that forms. The girls are surprised, and the masked one runs to protect the saint. Some gods appear satisfied, while others are bothered by the outcome. An evil god laughs, watching the young man. The sainted, in turn, sighs and asks for the place to be fixed, being promptly understood by the masked one. Soon after, the young man curses and delivers a violent kick, saying he is here then. The protagonist merely grumbles about that fat, stupid orc sending him to such a dangerous place. Recovering from the scare, Hansu asks if the boy didn't run away, and he replies that he planned to escape the day before. The demon explains that he didn't do it because a human appeared that he should avoid, got distracted, and lost track of time. While scratching his ear, Hansu asks who this human is, wondering if it is the Saint. Kogmo replies that he would already be buried if that scary thing had gone to the city. The protagonist then asks who it is, and the demon reveals that it was Prince Alsus, the third strongest warrior of the Master Kingdom. He continues rambling, explaining that Alsus belongs to the second generation of monsters, which reminds him of the times of the Monster Queen. Hansu didn't seem very interested until Kogmo mentioned that the prince wants to see him, and shout how dangerous this meeting could be for the boy. The demon clarifies that it is because the prince is a paladin blessed by the saint, and our boy concludes that, being a knight of the saint, it is better to keep him at a distance. He also states that Kogmo had said the prince didn't want to know about him, which makes the demon explode with rage, complaining that Hansu doesn't listen to anything. The little one comments that the two couldn't talk properly, and Kogmo realizes this just as Sarah and Kana appear, happy to see the hero again. The demon comments that no one called him, but he still went to look for him, and adds that the boy is quite popular among the girls. The goddess, however, shows no joy with this popularity. While having her ear pulled, Hansu comments that she must have come again to ask for a level increase. The demon observes that the hero tends to ignore others' feelings, and if he continues like this, he will never get married. The protagonist retorts that an old single demon is not exactly the best person to talk about this, leaving Kogmo hurt, and teary-eyed Sarah begins to say something to Hansu about grace, while Kana talks about a curse. Kogmo translates, explaining that the two were sad because they thought the little one had left before receiving their gratitude. He then asks what the outsider has been up to get the curse again, and the young man replies that he was just hunting next. The demon comments that with just the warrior's curse, entering cities will be complicated, and asks if the hero has eliminated any of them. Hansu laughs and says no. The pale one says goodbye, stating that if the two continue together, the human will end up in a coffin without getting married, which makes the young man furious, grabbing him by the neck and asking who will do the translations then. At that moment, Kogmo says he has an idea. They should find a blessed slave with language skills, and Hansu comments that he thought blessings were rare. The demon asks if there is anything that can be done without money and asserts that if the hero has earned so much, it should be enough. Our protagonist agrees, but realizes that the other was planning to flee. Kogmo admits he is thinking of leaving because the little guy is like that. The hero prepares to throw a punch when someone calls his name. Sarah seems uncomfortable, and Kina says something that the human does not understand. Hansu asks what it is about, and Kogmo calls him slow, questioning why a woman would come well-dressed to talk to a man. The hero replies that it can only be love. The pale one concludes that the innocent boy really has no idea, and the boy comments that they seem to want to play, and that he can join too. The demon observes the young man's hand and thinks that the goal of those girls is to get close to that human still. Kogmo warns that he does not intend to take risks while the prince is in the city, to which the outsider smiles strangely and calls him a coward. The dark-haired one becomes completely irritated, remembering that he has already warned about Hansu's slow reasoning. Meanwhile, the girls are having fun in the city with the little guy right behind. Later, a woman approaches from behind the hero while he takes a quick shower. Then, another person takes his measurements. When afternoon arrives, a large gate guarded by soldiers appears before them. Kina calls for Hansu, and Sarah says something that ends in skirt. The young man looks simply ridiculous, realizes how uncomfortable the clothes are, and wonders what those girls have planned. Looking around, he notices that the place looks like a mansion belonging to someone important and tries to imagine what kind of residence it is. Everyone enters the property, and a maid greets him, but the young man can only notice the details of the design. Our hero spots a blonde and thinks that the guy seems interesting. The man turns and pronounces Hansu's name. The little guy gets irritated to see that the stranger is handsome, while the prince shows gratitude and explains that the nobles were eager to meet the esteemed guest. The boy is confused to realize that he can perfectly understand what the blonde is saying. Alsus clarifies that it is the blessing of language, and that a prince should be able to speak all the languages of all peoples and races. He introduces himself as Prince Alsus, from the second family of the warrior kingdom. Leaving Sarah and Kinna shocked by the revelation, the noble thanks Hansu for defeating the orc, for saving the two noble daughters, and the hero replies that, as a resident of fantasy, he only did what he should. Alsus claims to be curious about the ability that annihilated the great orc, and asks the little guy if he can pay more attention to the sword. Our hero does not quite understand the request, but the prince appears extremely confident. The young man asks if the noble wants to discuss this right. At that moment, the girls exchange words that Hansu does not comprehend. Alsus admits that he may have gotten a bit too excited about the presence of the guests. Soon after, a large and appetizing banquet is served for the two. The prince comments that they will continue the conversation during dinner. While Hansu fills his plate with steak, the outsider tells the blonde that the little guy's blessing is quite interesting. Alsus confesses to being a bit envious of the fact that the young man's stomach never gets full, no matter how much he eats. The goddess whispers in Hansu's ear, saying she is happy, and asking him to learn from the prince. Then the boy makes a brief apology. The blonde comments that it is much better to eat this way than to let food go to waste. Then Alsus asks how the outsider obtained the warrior's curse, and the young man thinks he was expecting this question. Our hero replies that he once taught a lesson to a warrior who tormented an innocent fairy. The prince asks if he remembers what the man was like, and Hansu, confused, invents that he ruined the guy's face. Alsus says it's no problem, as they can find out who it is by investigating warriors with deformed faces. Then the boy thinks that probably nothing too serious will happen, but apologizes mentally to his friends. The blonde explains that the reason he called him is that, according to investigations, he is the most hunted individual by the orcs. Our protagonist then asks if he made any mistakes, and Alsus replies that for now, it is just an investigation, leaving the hero anxious. The prince recounts that all the orcs from the plains vanished as if by magic, almost as if they had been extinct. He asks if Hansu has any idea what happened, and the short one, nervous, only responds that he must have destroyed too many orcs. Alsus comments that if it were possible to eliminate orcs just by effort, they would already have dismissed the knights and captured all the monsters. Kana and Sarah nervously follow the conversation. Hansu just awkwardly laughs and agrees. While the prince remains focused on uncovering the truth, he states that the outsider is a very interesting figure, just as the girls said, and that he wishes to know him more and more. When night falls, everyone is outside, and Alsus comments that he planned to end the matter with just a thank you for saving the girls. However, he admits that he cannot control his curiosity now that he confirmed the hero is level 1, and thanks Hansu for accepting the duel. The young man thinks that perhaps he shouldn't use the holy sword, and the prince is shocked, asking if that is the fairy's blade. Our hero says it is an exaggeration to use a weapon just to show off, and announces that he will fight with his finger, which begins to glow with red flames. Alsus is impressed, says that it is incredible, and comments that the other easily masters a dangerous trick, something he learned by hurting his own hand many times. Hansu replies that he went through the same thing, and the goddess punches him, stating that a certain deity did not like the lie. The prince smiles, saying that the young man is extremely skilled, even being level 1, and his maid offers a spare sword. Determined, Alsus infuses magic into the blade and warns that he will allow the protagonist to make the first strike. The young man accepts the courtesy and remembers that the opponent is the third strongest knight in the kingdom, concluding that he might as well test all his power. All the potential of the hero awakens in a red wave of flames and energy, leaving the blonde confused, wondering internally what Hansu is. Around the outsider, everything turns red in an explosion of power, and he smiles, saying that he will go all out. He charges with full force, while the prince prepares to block the attack. The wave of power hits Kinna and Sarah, and Hansu realizes right away that something went wrong. He admits that this is a big problem and thinks he attacked with too much intensity unintentionally. The young man wonders what he will do if the prince is dead and glances quickly at the exit. Then Hansu runs away as fast as he can, shouts an apology, and does not look back at any moment. However, Alsus was not destroyed. In fact, he is fine and even smiling. The blonde notes that his reaction was slow, and the sword that received the power broke very easily. Still, he smiles as he concludes that the outsider is someone absurdly strong. A trail of destruction is marked on the ground. Sarah asks if Lord Alsus is okay, and Kinna wants to know if he came out unscathed. The prince simply confirms that he is, leaning on his knee to get up, and comments that the world is truly vast. Kinna says she thinks Hansu was terrified, and Sarah observes that he bolted at the same instant while wiping the sweat. The blonde admits that, due to his own weakness, he almost made the savior of the kingdom be accused of attempted royal murder. Alsus states that he wants to apologize and asks if they would help him. Sarah replies that the hero probably went to the motel. She adds that he will be back soon, and Kinna says they just have to wait a little. The prince simply smiles, feeling as excited as the day he learned to wield the sword with his mother elsewhere. The saint asks if anyone entered her room without permission, and the servants respond that no one did, indicating that an intruder passed through. She orders them to check the footprints on the floor, and the servants warn her to be careful, as it could be an assassination attempt. The young woman questions if there are assassins who leave such obvious traces and follows the marks, determining that no one leaves until she allows it. She reaches the point where the footprints disappear and comments that something has vanished. The saint says that any other object could have been taken, as it could be bought again, but the stolen item cannot be replaced. Then we see the torn backpack of Kong Hansu, clear evidence that the lying god has disappeared. A kind god asks about all that confusion, and the saint explains that the hero's backpack was stolen. He is left speechless, and she reinforces that it was only that object taken next. One hears that the same benevolent god reprimands her for not having destroyed the backpack earlier, leaving the woman nervous. This merciful god appears uncomfortable and asks what she intends to do now. The saint asserts that she will let fate decide, and he questions whether that is truly the final answer, also asking if there is a way to locate the backpack. She retorts that instead of questioning her, he could look for it himself. The god becomes even more frustrated, while the young woman comments that just thinking about Kong Hansu gives her a headache. Suddenly, the saint's crystal ball shines and calls out, asking if they can appear. She replies that yes and requests that they send a message to Prince Alsus and the fairy kingdom. Soon, a maid rushes to the prince and calls him, saying that the lady is looking for him. Alsus smiles and comments that he forgot to make a report, adding that he will leave the destroyed source and the rest to her. He looks at his own crystal ball and asks if the lady was really after him. The saint inquires about the investigation into the disappearance of the orcs. The blonde prince states that he is about to report. The plans to hunt orcs with the warriors are difficult to implement, and she confirms if that is the case. He continues by saying that the number of orcs has dropped drastically and is not returning to normal, which leads the saint to ask if he knows the reason. Alsus explains that they interrogated a captured orc using the blessing of language about another orc. According to the interrogation, the creature's habitat has been taken over by a demon, and the saint carefully analyzes the information. The prince emphasizes that they have not fully confirmed the story yet, and she responds that the investigation into demons should be reinforced. Next, Alsus calls the saint and says he has a suggestion. Shortly after, someone shouts for Kog'Maw, telling him to gather things as quickly as possible. Hansu says it's better to run now, as if they are caught, they will be executed for attempting to assassinate the prince. Kog'Maw calls the young man crazy, and the boy asserts that there is no reason to worry, as he can escape easily. The demon clarifies that the real concern is for his own skin, as getting involved with the outsider is not simple. While the hero tells the orc to open the portal, Kog'Maw is shocked by the fourth-dimensional magic portal, saying he thought the other couldn't use magic. Hansu replies that there is no time to explain, and tells the Pale One to meet him at the north gate of the city. The boy enters the portal and warns that he won't wait long, leaving the demon stunned and frustrated. Back with the prince, the saint says she understands and comments on the warrior who attacked a fairy. Alsus admits that he doesn't know his name or appearance, only that his face is disfigured, and the saint remembers someone. She mentions MANHWA, but concludes that even for him, causing such a commotion would be difficult, so it probably isn't the boy. The prince explains that he appointed inspectors for the case, so that expelled warriors do not create problems. The saint authorizes this procedure and requests that the civilians be generously rewarded. She comments that, in theory, the warrior's problem should be her responsibility, but she urgently needs to go to the fairy kingdom. Alcis understands and says that instead of punishments, he will give a reward so that no one is disappointed, and she responds that she trusts him. The prince finds himself thinking about this reward, and concludes that if he recruited Hansu as a knight, that level of armor would not be sufficient. Elsewhere, the protagonist wonders why his ears are itching, as if someone is talking about him. Then, the scene shifts to the ruins, where Hansu throws his stuff through the portal while some people watch. A boy with an eye patch is happy to see the hero back, and the young man is surprised to find Bruce awake, as the man should be sleeping. The outsider explains that he needed people, and Bruce asks what kind, in a way that the boy can understand more or less. Our hero clarifies that he needed people to help him carry all the luggage, and the boy with the eye patch smiles, accepting. The orc appears and wants to know what all that stuff is, and Hansu warns that the people will only move everything, not destroy it. But the monster grumbles that this isn't a storage place. The little one explains that they just need to take the things out of the sword and carry them to the exit, and the orc says that being weaker than the boy irritates him. The protagonist replies that he will take that as a compliment. In the dark forest, at night, something strange happens. Kog'Maw is biting his own nails out of anxiety. Hansu appears behind him, and the sharp-toothed one asks where the hell the boy came from. The hero says they need to run away from there as fast as possible, and the demon insists that at least the situation should be explained. The young man replies that they both need to flee as far away from the ladies as possible, and Kog'Maw asks if it's because of the warrior's curse. Hansu confirms the demon comments that if the intention is to escape as quickly as possible, the best route is north, and the boy asks what is there. Kog'Maw reveals that the largest slave market in the west is to the north, and that there they can find the slave they are looking for. Hansu grimaces, and the demon wants to know the reason for that expression. The boy replies that it's great he's not running, but only because the human took his things. The pale one adds that because of this he can't even get a horse. Knights will soon appear, so it's better to hurry, and the outsider lifts him into his lap. The young man asks if everything is ready, but Kog'Maw hates the idea, while Hansu argues that this way they will be faster and safer. A few minutes later, our hero asks how the demon can feel hungry in a situation like this, and he retorts not to be treated like a monster. Hansu prepares his sword, and from inside the portal, 2 plates of steak jump out, making both eat with pleasure. After they eat, they throw the plates back, and the human comments that it's not as good as what he had with the prince, but it was still great. Kog'Maw admits he has never heard of magic that prepares plates and also washes the dishes, and the warrior announces that it's time to continue their journey. The demon warns that they are almost there, and Hansu complains that they could have eaten later, to which Kog'Maw tells the hero to be quiet. Sometime later, the black-haired one informs that they have finally arrived, and the human comments that the place is huge. He also says it's pretty cool, but the annoying Kog'Maw tells him to stop acting like an NPC and to walk already. Someone says something confusing about waiting for a person, and Hansu doesn't understand. The fool assumes the guy is security and, not knowing what to respond, apologizes. A warrior says something that the boy also doesn't comprehend, and the young man feels embarrassed. Kog'Maw tells him to stop looking with that strange face. The demon explains that in overcrowded cities, problems arise if the checks are too strict, and the protagonist comments that it's a strange city. Kog'Maw assures that he won't run away for now so he can receive the stuff, but the human replies that only after they find a slave with the blessing of language. Our hero orders the sword to send the old brown backpack that is at the bottom, and in an instant the portal opens and the item is thrown out. Kog'Maw observes that it seems the sword is mediating everything, and concludes that the boy couldn't have learned that magic alone. So the blade must be magical. The demon asks to examine it and becomes confused, as he detects no spell, appearing just to be an ordinary iron sword. At that moment, the holy sword discharges a huge shock into Kog'Maw. Furious, the demon asks if that is really a holy sword, and Hansu says he didn't know the theft prevention was activated. Kog'Maw wants to know how he dares to let a demon touch that, and claims he should have suspected when the human gave in so easily. The black-haired one asks how the hero can hold the holy sword, and the boy replies that it's a defective product. Kog'Maw comments that the weapon came defective just like its owner, and Hansu threatens to make him repeat the comment. The sharp-toothed one asks the young man to put the blade away. Our hero asks if the demon is okay, as he looks exhausted, and he replies if it's possible for a demon to be calm in front of a holy sword. Soon after, we see a demon girl with a chain around her neck, tired eyes and silence on her lips. At the market, A man shouts that he sells young slaves, while another announces that his are strong. Hansu hears various conversations around and vents that this is disheartening. Kog'Maw wants to know what they should do then. The hero explains that he imagined the owner of the slaves mistreating everyone, and a man of justice appearing to save them. The demon says he expects nothing from someone who almost eliminated the prince. But still, he could think a little more normally, which irritates the protagonist. In an alley, a huge guy argues with a girl, threatening to hit her and shouting something about being her master, while the girl desperately apologizes. Hansu says that's what he was talking about, and Kog'Maw states that it's a lie made to evoke pity in people, who then go there and buy the slave. The demon tells him to look at that slave and explains that her skin is too good for someone who suffers abuse. Then Kog'Maw tells him not to fall for that kind of story and just to follow him. He comments that there are 4 main types of slaves being sold in the market. Humans, fairies, dwarves, and mermaids, with little price difference between the races, as the level is what really matters. Moreover, he warns that now that they have a destination, the human can go back alone later, and our hero asks since when they had a specific place to go. The demon replies that he knows some shops that only deal with high-quality slaves. Soon, Hansu enters a fancy establishment, and someone welcomes the visitor. It is a very beautiful fairy, who asks something about slaves that he doesn't understand. Kog'Maw then announces that he is looking for a slave with the blessing of language, and she, curious, asks what level it should be. The demon explains that if the person has that specific blessing, the rest is not relevant. Hansu adds that it needs to be someone capable of accompanying him on the journey, and Kog'Maw questions if such a slave really exists still. The little guy asserts that from then on, he will ask the questions himself and threatens to say something silly. But the fairy quickly responds that she has exactly one of those available. Leaving the demon dumbfounded, he comments pityingly that he feels sorry for the slave who will suffer at the hands of the little guy. The 3 ascend a staircase, and Hansu comments that it seems they have gathered the best slaves there, asking if no one tries to escape being kept that way. Kog'Maw clarifies that everyone there carries the curse of slaves, without exception, and tells him to look at the status window. He explains that whoever holds all rights over the slave has possession, and whenever the subordinate goes against the owner's command, they feel pain. The protagonist is reading the status window of one of the captives when the fairy calls the 2, saying that this is the slave they are looking for. It is that girl with horns, a demon slave, and Kog'Maw confirms by asking if she really is a demon. The answer is yes. He finds it fascinating, as it is very rare to see a demon captured and turned into a slave by humans, and Hansu agrees, saying he already knew that. Kog'Maw, confused, asks what exactly that means, and the young man replies that the other asked for a slave just like himself, a demon. Furious, the little guy declares that he will buy her, but the fairy informs him that he does not have enough money. Hansu then asks the prisoner how she ended up in this situation, and she explains that there was a very valuable man to her who doubted her love, so she consented to become his slave. Our hero comments that, in the end, she was abandoned, calling it an obvious story, and the goddess observes that it is quite a boring plot. Meanwhile, Kog'Maw cries, saying that he finds everything very sad. The slave and the demon are left unsure how to react. The girl asks her own master to free her from that insect who looks at her as if she were inferior, saying that she feels like tearing his eyes out. The human decides to end the scene and says that they are leaving, and she asks if everything is alright without a confirmation, hearing that yes, since both checked her status window. Her name is Dialoka, level 27, with blessings of demon, warrior, dignity, language, observation, slave, and resistance. Hansu asks why she is like that, and she comments that the slave blessing is strange, as the description says that the person feels happiness every time they obey the master. She begs him to order her to translate, stating that the only reason to obey an inferior human is to enjoy receiving orders in response. Kog'Maw warns that if she is ordered to do something strange, he will not forgive Hansu. Then Dialoka glares at the pale one with pure disgust, leaving the hero speechless. Next, she asks the outsider to give the order for her to destroy that demon. Our hero replies that it is not time to destroy him yet, while pondering if he should check other slaves, and Kog'Maw ends up getting beaten up. Soon after, Hansu observes people transporting all their junk. The little guy comments that he bought many because they were cheap, and Dialoka notes that everyone's level is low. In light of this, the protagonist orders them to come in one at a time. Kog'Maw says he has something important to say, and Hansu asks if he is leaving, but hears that he is not. The demon explains that he changed his mind and decided to accompany the boy, but at that moment, he is hit by an arrow in the neck. Dialoka comments that she was waiting for the chance to do this, but someone was faster. The demon girl then steps on Kog'Maw's head. Hansu observes that they are being attacked in broad daylight, dodges an arrow, and comments with shining eyes that this world is becoming more and more fascinating. Next, Dialoka throws a punch at a man's face, sending him flying away. The people around scream in panic, saying that a murder just happened. Hansu considers the chaos a problem, as the crowd will only grow while the demon continues to beat another guy. She notices that those men are slave thieves and concludes that the rumor must have spread about a level 1 guy buying several servants. 2 knights arrive asking what the hell is going on there. Our hero adds that the guards have already shown up, and Dialoka asks if she should exterminate the 2. She says that being a slave, it doesn't make a difference to her, but remembers that no one can find out that Kog'Maw is a demon and questions whether she should eliminate him too. Hansu decides that it's better for them to disappear from that city as soon as possible. In the forest, he asks if anyone followed them, throws Kog'Maw to the ground, and tells him to pull himself together, saying he can't act like a weakling. The demon protests, claiming he's not weak, just that he had never been so close to being murdered, and, therefore, let his guard down. Dialoka questions if he lived all this time without defense, relying only on healing, and says he needs to face his own level of weakness. Kog'Maw responds angrily, reminding her that she's talking to a woman who lowered her level so much that she became a slave bought for money. While they argue, our boy grumbles because his shirt is dirty with blood again. Suddenly Dialoka tries to attack Hansu, but he quickly dodges. The boy grabs her wrist and asks if it seems that easy to take him down. She snarls in anger and tries to hit the boy again, but this time the hero concentrates energy in his hand and counterattacks. At the same moment he tears and burns her hand. Furious, Kog'Maw screams at Hansu, while the short guy stands still, smiling like an idiot. Dialoka then asks if he is really level 1. The protagonist admits that it might not be quite like that and then asks if she will also say she wasn't attacking with full force like Kog'Maw. He clenches his fist, which begins to glow with red flames, and continues smiling with determination. Dialoka retorts that he is just a mere human. Hansu replies that it's alright and promises to show her the true power of a master. Several red fists emerge from the sides of Hansu's body. The demon is hit from all directions. Her clothes and skin begin to tear in several places, and the boy comments that he will throw just one more punch. However, it's as if her waist shrinks at the last moment, causing the attack to miss completely. Dialoka comments that it seems he also let his guard down. Hansu smiles awkwardly and thinks that this is going to hurt a lot. Her purple punch hits his chest with all its force. Dialoka states that a wound of that level is nothing for a demon and asks him to say that he is free, as she will heal him immediately. Hansu refuses, ordering her body to remain completely still. She cannot go against the master's voice. Our hero adds that Dialoka's owner also doesn't fall apart because of a wound like that. The demon asks if he is really human and regenerates his torn arm in front of them. Hansu realizes that they both have regeneration abilities and concludes that it would be better to fight until the end to see who falls first. Dialoka questions if this is an order, and Kog'Maw calls the human a monster, saying he will help her. She casts a disdainful look at the demon. Not understanding the intention, Kog'Maw claims that he traveled with the young man all this time, so he knows his fighting style well and promises to provide support with magic. Soon after, the beast takes a sword strike to the forehead. Hansu comments that this guy keeps saying he knows everything but clearly didn't expect that attack, and Dialoka concludes that it's hard to be as annoying as he is. The hero runs towards the demon girl, shouting that all of this is to impress her, and delivers a full strike, but she manages to defend. Dialoka retorts that she hates men who cannot be trusted. With his red fist raised, the outsider reminds her that she was the one who betrayed his trust first. The girl gathers intense purple magic and states that she is indeed a slave, but never swore she would be his slave. Hansu's red energy collides with Dialoka's purple, creating a gigantic explosion. She realizes that her healing power is not keeping up with her own injuries and wonders what the hell that boy is. The protagonist laughs, saying that this is a great excuse, and shows himself extremely confident. Sure of his strength, a massive colorful explosion lights up the forest surrounding the kingdom. Dialoka remains with both hands covered in purple power, ready to attack the hero with everything. But Hansu is quick, easily dodging each of her strikes right after. He lands a violent kick to her stomach and warns her that she has no chance against him. He fires again towards the demon and lands another energy-charged kick to her face. She can barely stay on her feet but refuses to admit defeat. Hansu comments that she used to say she didn't care about her own body. Yet even so, she is stronger than the orc. Dialoka spreads her two wings with claws at the upper tips. Our boy prepares the next energized punch, declaring that before she can fly, he will end everything. Still, the blow doesn't hit her because now she can lift herself in the air. The demon hangs onto his arm like a parakeet. She then gains momentum and performs a backflip. Hansu notices that, despite alternating between attack and regeneration, the girl is starting to show signs of fatigue. He activates the power of the wandering fairy and comments that she isn't as incredible as she seems. Dialoka rises higher, lifts a leg, and warns that she will finish everything with a single blow. She plummets towards him with demonic eyes, her leg engulfed in purple power, and the protagonist responds that he will also put an end to this. The young man smiles, almost insane, with his hand full of energy. But something makes him stop and look confused, unable to believe what he sees. Hansu takes a strong blow to the top of his head, which must have hurt a lot. Dialoka also receives a similar impact. Both were hit by powerful attacks. The human wonders if he is lost, while a certain goddess rages that this is ridiculous and says she wants to clean his brain, questioning if this kind of defeat is normal. Furious, the deity recounts everything she perceived, and the hero murmurs that it was an irresistible force. Dialoka calls for the master, asking if he is conscious, and requests new clothes. Hansu mentally questions why he would have to do that, but Kog'Maw, still with the sword stuck in his head, says he will find clothes that look great on her. The demon responds with a punch to his own face and reminds him that food, clothing, and shelter are the master's responsibility. The protagonist finds the demand very bold, but ends up grabbing a dress from the portal. It's a blue outfit, and she comments that it was foolish to think she couldn't overload the boy because she had no idea what would happen. Dialoka makes it clear that she doesn't want the possession to be transferred to that trash. When she is exhausted like this, she still complains that it seems like he let himself lose in the end, which was not satisfying at all. Hansu asks if she has nothing else to say, like admitting she lost or promising to obey. The demon replies that she learned that an inferior creature is her owner. But accepting this condition was extremely difficult. She declares that all of this is humiliation and that she will be mocked for her entire life, so this test was necessary. In return, she hears that this is her problem. The girl asserts that he is very greedy and wants to know what else he intends to extract from her. Kog'Maw becomes absolutely furious and warns that if the human makes absurd demands, he will never forgive him. Dialoka digs her heel into the boy's forehead and asks what he plans to do if he doesn't forgive Hansu, questioning if he would have the courage to attack the demon's own master. The goddess comments that Kog'Maw is a demon without the slightest hope, and Hansu realizes that his vitality is absurd. The girl holds the protagonist's face with both hands. He pushes her hands away, asking what she is trying to pull this time. Dialoka hugs him and says she received the reward request the right way, is exhausted because of the little guy, and therefore will leave the rest of the work to him. Hansu feels uncomfortable and complains while Kog'Maw screams in jealousy like a lunatic. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the prince announces to the crystal ball that he intends to offer a great prize to someone, and the saint claims to trust him. She emphasizes that the situation is serious, as the orcs of the plains have been annihilated. Someone remembers that last time, it was the numbers of gnolls that plummeted in the forest. And now, it's the orcs. The person asks if the saint summoned him to solve this problem, and she replies that it's not exactly that. Then the great elder Cerebrest appears, asking about the gnoll forests. She comments that she wonders how he is, and we see two people kissing with a phoenix standing beside them. Cerebrest explains that at the saint's request, she will try to locate the stolen items and discover the culprit. The saint wants to know if this is really possible, and the elder warns that she may not find the responsible party, but she has a method. She declares that she will try to ask for cooperation from a certain friend. The saint, curious, apologizes for the question but wants to know what kind of ability this friend possesses. The elder laughs and says that Molong is a special slime, different from all the others. The saint apologizes again, stating that she doesn't understand anything at all. In response, Cerebrest claims that she will understand when she sees Molong's power. The elder asks where the clues to find the thief are, and the saint replies that this is the crime scene. She wants them to discover the intruder who entered her room. She is horrified to learn that someone invaded her own quarters. Sarabreast asks Molong to reveal the identity of the intruder, and the strange little creature shouts Molong very loudly and starts to shine. The saint asks what Professor Molong is trying to say, and is shocked to realize that even the blessing of language cannot interpret that. The elder explains that, according to the slime, the invader escaped using the sacred sword, hanging on the wall, and the saint concludes that the culprit is the warrior. Sarabreast says she already suspected who was responsible, and the saint thanks her, asking if there is anything else she can help with. The older fairy replies that she is planning to attend a magic institute, and it would be great if she could receive help this time. The saint asks if she is asking to become a teacher at that institute. The elder confirms and says that, in the last incident, her level was lower than that of a soldier, so she couldn't do anything. She comments that she tried to level up by hunting, but realized that this kind of life doesn't suit her. Sarabreast, due to her benign nature and reluctance for wars, even after living thousands of years as a fairy, remains only at level 12. She explains that if she can obtain the title of teacher, she will be able to accumulate experience outside of battles. The saint understands and promises to do her best in another region. A boy with spiky black hair smiles. It's Ohanwoo, who comments that he tied despite the huge level difference between them, and warns Choi Kongmin that next time he will be destroyed. An evil god gives a thumbs up, and a childish god shouts that it was very cool, which fills Hanwoo with satisfaction. A muscular merchant calls out to the boy and says that here are the items he requested. The boy realizes that it is much more than he imagined. The man explains that he added some extras in gratitude to the future savior of the world, and Hanwoo admits that he still thinks it's excessive. He takes the opportunity to ask if there is any dungeon nearby that hasn't been conquered yet. The merchant replies that there isn't, but the boy insists, saying that maybe they just haven't found one, since warriors keep getting stronger. Then, he notices a strange crowd and questions what is happening. Bidding farewell to the merchant, who wishes him a safe journey, the gossiping boy goes to squeeze into the crowd to find out the situation. There is Sarabreast, whom he considers very beautiful, and he wonders if she is a noble. The woman apologizes for the commotion and says she is not seeking revenge. People murmur, not knowing why she is there, and Molong starts shouting non-stop. An old man with a mustache pushes some curious onlookers aside to stand in front, and the elder asks if he is the new mayor. The man confirms. She questions if the basement remains the same, and the man nods positively, pointing in the direction. Hanwoo deduces that this must be a heroic event. He tries to strike up a conversation with Sarabreast, and she asks what he wants, with a small firebird perched on her head, while the boy asks if she has something to share. The boy then uses his special ability on her, but the fairy simply says that she doesn't understand the purpose of those questions. The ability fails, and Hanwoo is left confused as to why he didn't receive any sign of a heroic event. A male-looking god comments that there is another owner, and an evil god agrees, so the boy changes the subject and asks if she is married. The elder replies that she was planning something in that regard. She remembers the vision of the kiss. A guard comments that this kind of topic is inappropriate, and Sarabreast shouts for him to stop, saying that it makes her sad. She calls the mayor and tells them to move on, while a male god asks Hanwoo if the bro is okay. The boy replies that of course the fairy has reasons she couldn't explain, and that as the protagonist he feels he should help her. The male god admires him, and the childish god fills the scene with exclamations, while Hanwoo decides that there is no reason to flee from there, since he barely knows who she is, and perhaps he should investigate further. In another setting, Alcis says that the warrior's goal is to dominate the Demon King, and to do that, they need to mobilize all possible means. The blonde explains that this time, the tournament will have the same format. In the areas marked with red lines, they left a large number of orcs free. The participants' duty is to hunt orcs and check the mark on their ankles. A blonde girl tenses up just hearing the word orc. Others behind her show fear, and a young man becomes terrified. The prince clarifies that the method used doesn't matter. The winner will simply be whoever brings back the most markings. The grand prize of the competition is the sacred sword of the warrior, a unique piece. Choi Kongmin feels frustrated upon hearing this because, to make up for being dominated by Hanwoo, he needs to win the tournament. Hanwoo comments that it would be great if there were saved points, and we see he is at level 4 with various accumulated blessings. Soon he realizes he can't enter the academy because he doesn't have the official rank of warrior, and he overhears two guards talking. One of them asks if the other was assigned as an escort, receives confirmation, and hears that the warriors are being sent to the Magic Academy. Additionally, they mention that the Elder Fairy will work there as a teacher, which lights a bulb in MANHWA's head as he begins to imagine the teacher-student relationship. He fantasizes about a scene where the teacher approaches from behind, saying that it's wrong, reminding that they are master and disciple. MANHWA smiles in his imagination and explains that he doesn't care about something so simple. The young man declares that he likes the teacher, and she, in the fantasy, admits to liking him. He even blushes just imagining it, but refocuses and admits that being accepted into the academy will be complicated. An evil god assures that MANHWA will be accepted if everything goes back to normal, while a water god says he is not interested, and the boy claims he can become a warrior again. That night, in the temple, something happens. Someone comments that it's been a while since they last saw each other, and Choi turns to look. The person says that, actually, it hasn't been that long, and Jang seems completely uninterested. Alsos asks how he got there, and MANHWA shouts that he will participate in the tournament too. The prince explains that someone who is not a warrior cannot enter, and hears the young man say he will reclaim the title, that his level should be sufficient. The noble laughs and asks if the others agree, making Choi shrink back and call out MANHWA's name. Alsos notices how irritated the boy is and comments that he heard he is considered Choi Kangmin's rival. He then remembers Kang Hansu, declares he has suspicions about his personality, and asks if they have forgotten the incident with the fairy. MANHWA gets nervous, questions how the prince knows this, and insists it was a misunderstanding, that he was just trying to help. The blonde is unconvinced, asking how he has the courage to make up such an obvious lie. He raises his hand to act but notices something. The saint is leaning against the wall, watching. The prince wonders if she is just waiting for something and cannot understand her intentions. Finally, Alsos agrees to let MANHWA compete, and the boy nearly explodes with happiness. However, he imposes the condition that he must return the money received when he gave up his warrior rank. MANHWA admits to having blown all the cash training but promises to pay it back soon and asks them not to worry. The blonde, however, does not seem satisfied, saying it is too early to be happy and that he wants to see how much the warrior has grown on his own since leaving the temple. Alsos strengthens his fist with energy and says he will confirm personally. The onlookers are shocked, while MANHWA warns that the prince will be surprised. An evil god complains that there isn't enough popcorn, and another, calmer one, watches with a satisfied expression. The young man envelopes his hand in flames, saying he is ready. Something happens, but the impact itself is not shown. Choi wonders if he is still alive. MANHWA appears upside down, embedded in the wall like a loser, but the blessing of survival prevents him from losing his life. Alsos says that was enough for confirmation, asks the participants to raise their hands, and warns that there will be no extra protection in the tournament. The candidates are frightened, questioning if they can die again. Some raise their hands, Choi too, another boy beside him. Then Yubora and Jeongmyeon, another young man, presents himself, while the rest remain undecided. The prince observes everything and advises the hesitant warriors not to regret it later, making it clear from the start whether they want to participate or not. The saint interrupts, saying that is enough, and that the warriors' decision must be respected. She explains that those who will not compete should return to the dorms and pack their things. The audience is confused, asking what she means by packing things. The saint makes it clear that they plan to heavily sponsor the brave and determined warriors, and that this was part of the selection process. Many who had not raised their hands now want to fight. She declares that a true warrior needs courage, and that those who seek only money are no different from mere mercenaries. A girl comments that the winner has already been decided, and someone justifies that they were only facing reality, not fleeing out of cowardice. The saint, however, asserts that she does not need warriors who look too much at reality and flee from battles. Soon after, she announces that those who remained have bravely passed the first stage of the tournament, and explains that, for the second, she will ask for blessings from their gods. Meanwhile, MANHWA remains there, glued to the wall. In another area, our hero carries the demon girl on his back and grumbles that Kog'Maw is a jerk, not expecting a goodbye of that kind. We see the demon shouting that he will come back stronger and more suitable to serve Miss Dialoka. A certain goddess comments that he is not like the outsider, and tells the boy to abandon the demon, But Hansu asks for calm. The young man explains that only the translator has changed form. Now it is a woman. Some random god says that this is extremely uncomfortable, repeats the same complaint 1,000 times, and then simply leaves. Hansu is confused by this story of giving the foot. He calls for the goddess over and over again with no response and wonders if she is really taking this so seriously. Then, a certain goddess peeks in Alsa's comments that it confirms how the boy grew up practically without support. Soon, a god wanders around and checks his schedule. Then she realizes that the prize is a sacred sword, and that the top-ranked will have guaranteed entry to the Hogwarts Academy of Magic. The goddess is radiant with the discovery. At another point, the protagonist throws the demon girl to the ground. He observes how beautiful she looks when she sleeps. Hansu opens his status window. The hero notes that the blessing is still active, a sign that the goddess still accompanies him. An employee asks the human for permission and says something incomprehensible to him. Then, she is horrified to see him sitting with red eyes and a grim expression while souls float around. The woman runs away in despair, and Hansu doesn't understand anything. He remembers the curse of the massacre. Friendly races begin to fear his presence, keep their distance, and may even revolt. The outsider comments that he feels a strangely pleasant tingling and states that this will become a big problem. He looks out the window and concludes that it is the perfect time for those thieves to act. He decides he needs to take revenge on all of them before leaving. A certain goddess returns home, and the young man comments that she came back earlier than he expected. She takes pride in his solitary journey and demands compliments. He praises her and asks if she wants to go somewhere, but the goddess questions if he is abandoning the demon girl. Hansu says that the demon is incapacitated, and then the goddess wants to know where he is going. The hero replies that he intends to find the thieves who attacked them, as it is only fair to say goodbye. The goddess wants to know the destination after that, and he admits that he hasn't decided yet. She insists that he go immediately to the academy, but Hansu shows no interest. He says he will only think about it after teaching the thieves a lesson, making the goddess uncomfortable to the point of lying on the ground. The divinity insists that he promise to go. Hansu states that he will reflect on it if she helps him. The goddess widens her eyes and asks if, after helping him, they will go together to the academy. He repeats that he will evaluate. The goddess' curiosity increases, and she asks what he needs help with. The young man replies that to catch a fish, he needs bait. A slave thanks the outsider, and the boy asks to take something to another place. Hansu thanks the foreign goddess for the translation. She says she is curious about why he needs more slaves and states that everything will be useful. The girl mentions children of wizards, knights, and nobles, commenting that the price is low at initial levels, whatever the job. Hansu comments that they don't seem strange, which is sad. And the goddess says that the important thing is the inner value. He agrees. Suddenly the hero feels an attack coming from behind, but he immediately defends himself and protects the slaves. Two boys celebrate having hit him and insult him for being level 1 with so many slaves. The thieves then realize that the protagonist has not been defeated. Hansu criticizes their mundane methods and asks if they are really allies of the men who attacked him earlier. One of the boys asks not to be underestimated and continues saying things that Hansu doesn't understand. Then the boss appears behind the group. Confused, the human tries to see what is happening and sees 3 more thieves emerging from the walls. Soon even more appear. Hansu deduces that the leader has gathered several henchmen. The chief, armed with a double-headed axe, jumps from the roof to the ground. The goddess pleads for the young man to go to the academy, but the hero ignores her and asks if that is the boss. The man lands heavily. The goddess continues insisting for an answer, but Hansu apologizes and says he will do a massacre now and they can talk later. The boss glares at the boy with insane eyes and the goddess is annoyed. He orders everyone to attack. The goddess complains that the massacre is slow. The human confirms he knows. His left hand is charged with power and everything will be quick. The boss is terrified to see his power. The outsider strikes a thief's neck and the boss wonders how a level 1 can do that. Hansu comments that it's strange to crush minions with his own hands. The goddess spins and dances, telling him to massacre the bandits faster. Hansu greets the boss, who is about to wet himself in fear. He states that the bandit made the right decision by not fleeing and says he won't eliminate him. The leader tries to escape. Hansu doesn't let it slide, asks how he dares to run, and hits him with a double kick to the back. The man's spine breaks in half. He foams at the mouth and falls face first to the ground. The thieves ask how he could have done that and charge at the hero. Han-Soo turns quickly and the outcome doesn't seem favorable for the bandits. Later, two guards wonder if the thieves are alive. All are tied up and stacked and they find it impressive. Our protagonist receives a good reward. The guard explains that the slimes clean dirt, but Han-Soo notices something behind him. He sees that the thieves left a bone and questions why the slimes don't clean it. The guard explains it's an embedded bone. Han-Soo smiles upon realizing that slimes don't devour high-quality materials. It was a special bone. Meanwhile, the goddess insists they go to the academy. She complains about being ignored, invites the human, and assures him that everything will be clarified there, but he doesn't even know where the academy is. A mustached man calls the little one and asks for a minute. The boy looks confused. The mustached man says something about his son being at the academy, and Han-Soo understands he might be wanted for actual attempted murder. The little one notices the man is a knight and the goddess translates, saying he wants to buy the bone. Han-Soo is confused by her initiative. She says the knight wants to use the bone to make a gift for his son, repeats academy several times, and waits for the hero's response. Han-Soo tells the knight he wants something beyond money. He wants to go to the academy too. The goddess is delighted. The knight doesn't understand and she spins around him, happy and with a racing heart, but the man's response leaves her indignant. The hero asks what he said, and the little one becomes uncomfortable. Tapping her foot, Han-Soo deduces the meaning from her reaction and thinks of another negotiation. Dialoka appears behind him. The hero is startled and asks how she got there. Dialoka complains that he left her alone when she was hurt and that this has gone too far. Han-Soo gets irritated by her touch and the demon asks if he is shy while the knight prepares to speak. He shouts that Dialoka is a demon. She responds by calling him a knight. Both stare at each other, ready to draw weapons. Dialoka asks who this knight is and Han-Soo asks her to translate what he says. The man talks about demons and humans and asks if she is a slave. Dialoka warns that it's dangerous to be unprotected if she isn't. The little goddess tells the hero to negotiate quickly and says she's tired of repeating. He asks everyone to calm down and negotiate properly. The goddess can't wait and has an idea, then leaves. The little one asks where she went. The knight repeats that he won't allow Han-Soo to go to the academy and the boy gets nervous. But something happens and everyone is stunned. The man doesn't understand. Han-Soo and Dialoka also can't remain steady and wonder what that is. Guards point to the sky, shocked. A giant monstrous hand reveals enormous claws. It's a colossal red dragon. A demonic voice, releasing smoke, declares that the despair that surpasses death has returned and will destroy everyone along with the warrior they trust. The dragon is perplexed to see that the body before him is only level 1. Han-Soo smiles proudly.